Chapter 1736. Ling Han didn't just stand there and take the beating. He channeled the nine heavens flame, and boom, the flames burned the sky. That first Severance Grand Elder immediately retreated. He had a feeling that if he was touched by these flames, he would be burned alive. He only stopped when he retreated 300 meters away, his eyes staring at the flames, his expression uncertain. He calmed his mind and looked carefully again, discovering that he had made a big fuss over a minor issue. These flames were indeed very frightening, but it was almost impossible to break through his defenses. So strange, it gave him a feeling of apprehension, but in reality, it wasn't very strong. Suddenly, a thought that he didn't dare to believe welled up in his mind. Ancestral fire. According to legends, there were a total of 9 types of ancestral fire in the celestial realm, and they were the source of all flames. They could also be regarded as the most direct form of fire regulations. Someone had once prophesied that if one could obtain all 9 ancestral fires, they would be able to achieve the strongest regulations of fire, surpassing all kings. Could it be that this was one of the ancestral fires? Otherwise, he was clearly only at the Genesis tier. So why would he feel a sense of apprehension that he would die if he touched it? This brat had the fortune of heaven, actually refining an ancestral fire. That first Severance Grand Elder's eyes were red. Even celestial kings might not be able to touch such a precious treasure. But it was in the possession of a mere Genesis tier. He was going to seize this opportunity. Ha 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 ha, I'm going to take it. That first Severance Grand Elder grabbed at Ling Han, regulations entwined around his hands. This was enough to resist the 9 heavens flame. Ling Han sighed. The second Severance Grand Elders that would come here would definitely be those who had just barely managed to pass the first Severance. Bei Xianming was an exception, but even so he, a king among kings in the Genesis tier, was still no match for such weak severing mundane tier Grand Elders. The gap between celestial and mortal was really huge. No wonder so many people were full of confidence, thinking that no matter how big the gap was now, as long as they advanced into the severing mundane tier, it would be equivalent to starting from the same starting point again. Haha, let's stop here today. The next time we meet, I'll cut off your dog head. Ling Han tossed out the wooden raft and left hand in hand with the Empress, leaving that first Severance Grand Elder roaring behind. There was no helping it. There was great Tao flowing in the river, and perhaps only celestial kings could cross it. You have to advance to the severing mundane tier as soon as possible, Ling Han said seriously. The Empress nodded in deep agreement. Even though they were invincible in the Genesis tier, they would still be restricted if they encountered a first Severance Grand Elder. This was really extremely displeasing to them. The river flowed very quickly, but there were no splashes. It was terrifyingly calm. If one looked carefully at the river water, they would discover that there were great Tao symbols surging about. Unfortunately, this river water could not be drunk. Otherwise, it would be a supreme treasure for martial artists who cultivated the water great Tao. There were no living beings in the water. This was very normal. If one could survive in this kind of river water, then this kind of living being would have to be at the immortal king level. Go to the source of the river, Small Tower suddenly said. After entering the celestial realm, Small Tower seemed to have become invisible, and basically did not respond to Ling Han. According to its words, the celestial realm was full of spiritual qi, and was greatly beneficial to its recovery, so it could not be bothered to pay attention to Ling Han. He didn't expect that he would take the initiative to speak now. Ling Han said in his mind, once you speak, there is definitely nothing good. Have you discovered something here that is beneficial to your recovery again? Small Tower scoffed and said, I suspect that there is source water of heaven and earth here, and originally planned to help you. But since you have said so, then I can't be bothered to be a busybody. Wait, what is source water of heaven and earth? Ling Han hurriedly asked. Since there are 9 great ancestral flames that are born from heaven and earth, why can't there be source water of the same level? Small Tower asked calmly, and then did not speak further. Ancestral flames, source water, the same level. Ling Han hissed and said, I can similarly refine it and turn it into my source power. Theoretically, so Small Tower said. However, I do not want to help you obtain the source water of heaven and earth at present, so that is completely impossible. Fuck this Thundera Tower, didn't he just say a few words to it? Ling Han sighed and said, stop fooling around, speak seriously. Small Tower humphed a few times, and then said, this river is very likely formed from the source water of heaven and earth. If you trace its source, you should be able to discover the existence of the source water. How do I collect it? Ling Han asked. This river cannot be touched at all, and touching it is the same as death. Without my guidance, you naturally would be dead for sure. But with my existence, everything is different, Small Tower said proudly, but did not continue. Clearly, it still bore a grudge. Be good, Small Tower, I was too harsh with my words just now. Ling Han could only surrender. If it was an enemy, he could still defeat them, but the Thundera Tower was inside his body, so he could not do anything about it at all. Small Tower put on airs for a while, and then said, actually it is very simple. You have refined the Nine Heavens flame as source power, and as long as you wrap yourself with the Nine Heavens flame, you can guarantee that you will not be harmed by the source water. Can it work? Ling Han was doubtful. The Nine Heavens flame had not even reached the severing mundane tier, so how could it resist this kind of source water? Idiot! It is not asking you to directly resist the source water. This is only a sliver of aura that seeps out from the source water. If the Nine Heavens flame cannot even resist this, then what right does it have to be called an ancestral flame? Small Tower was disapproving. But I still have to sever the mundane, and if I deviate from the direction... Ling Han hesitated. If he missed this chance to sever the mundane, then he would have to wait another 10 million years, or find another place to sever the mundane. But if he also had to wait 10 million years, he would definitely choose to break through to the severing mundane tier first, and then come in to collect the source water. Sigh. How did I end up with such a stupid master like you? Small Tower sighed sorrowfully. The entire mystery realm should be formed from the source water of heaven and earth. If you can obtain the source water, that is equivalent to severing the mundane in a place with the densest power of heaven and earth. And this is still not enough. Ling Han immediately felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. This was great, and there was no delay in either. The Nine Heavens flame was already incredibly awesome, and if he could collect another source water of heaven and earth to become his own source power, then just how strong would his battle prowess be? He told this matter to the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and the two women naturally agreed that he should go and collect the source water. In any case, the Empress could enter the Black Tower and come out when she reached the source water and sever the mundane there. Ling Han delivered palm strikes, pushing the wooden raft forward. On the way, he also caught up with a great many people, and saw that some wooden rafts had a great battle after encountering each other. As long as the people on board were blasted into the water, they would definitely be done for. After walking for a while, he unexpectedly discovered Zhang Chong and Mao Shiyu, and followed behind them again. This decision of his was very correct, because the two of them had encountered a few waves of attacks. In the last wave, they were unable to dispel it, and it was still Ling Han who moved, resolving the danger for them. Mao Shiyu's eyes were sharp, and she recognized Ling Han. Zhang Chong meanwhile was embarrassed. When he thought of his attitude towards Ling Han in the past, and now the latter was helping them regardless of their former enmity, he felt very apologetic. Ling Han accompanied them on their journey. 2 days later they came ashore. From here, they would be able to reach the final place of severing the mundane. But it was also the most dangerous place in the severing mundane pool, and was called the Cave of Death. Chapter 1737. Why aren't you guys coming with us? Mao Shiyu asked curiously. At this point, it was time to go ashore and head for the Cave of Death. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You go first, we still have to go to another place." Another place? Didn't they come to the severing mundane pool to sever their mundane? Then they only had to go to one place, the final destination, the Cave of Death. Why would they go to any other place? However, Ling Han did not say anything. Though Mao Shiyu was incredibly curious, she was unable to get anything out of him. Thus, she could only advance with Zhang Chong, her mind filled with questions. Ling Han and the others continued to board the wooden raft, going against the current. By bringing Zhang Chong and Mao Dai here, Ling Han felt that he had already fulfilled Mao Dai's trust. No matter what, he couldn't possibly be their nanny the entire time. The three of them boarded the wooden raft, only to see that Fu Xiaoyan and Bei Xianming had just arrived. However, what was surprising was that they actually did not go ashore. Instead, they continued going against the current, as if they were also heading towards the source water. Their gazes instantly intersected. Fu Xiaoyan remained calm and collected, while Bei Xuanming's lips curled up in a mocking expression. A mere ant also has the qualifications to walk side by side with this saint. Oh, do you know what the source of this river is? Ling Han asked deliberately. Bei Xianming snorted and said, Do I need to tell you? You're probably just pretending to know when you don't. Ling Han laughed. Bei Xianming instantly revealed his killing intent. This tiny ant actually dared to mock him. He instantly wanted to make a move, yet he was pressed down by Fu Xiaoyan, so he could only withdraw in displeasure. Fu Xiaoyan looked at Ling Han and said, I have received advice from a senior in my clan. If I want to sever my mundane in another way, I can only head to the source of this river. The mystical power of heaven and earth there is enough to support me. She paused for a moment, as if she was waiting for Ling Han's expression to change. But how could Ling Han's expression change? She continued, Why did you go to the end of the river? A different kind of severing mundane. And that would be striking the heaven and earth with a saber strike. The other party was the successor of a 3-star force. So it was not strange for him to know that he could slash the heavens and earth. However, what made Ling Han feel lucky was that he could only slash the heavens and earth at the source of the river. He could not do it in the cave of death. After all, Mao Dai was only guessing that the severing mundane pool could allow him to strike heaven and earth once. However, he was limited by his cultivation level and experience, so how could he compare to a noble of the immortal palace tier? He had to properly thank Small Tower. If it were not for its reminder, Ling Han would not have been able to strike the heavens and earth. He would have either been severely injured or even killed by the backlash, or he would have been forced to strike himself. Ling Han smiled and said, What a coincidence. I also want to sever the mundane in another way. Ha ha ha, you think you're worthy? Bei Xianming laughed loudly. In the veteran 3-star forces, advancing into the severing mundane tier by striking the heaven and earth was no secret. But knowing was one thing, and being able to do it was another. Bei Xianming had once wanted to strike the heaven and earth, but in the end, he had not been able to do it. This strike had still landed on his mortal karma. Now, a brat who had popped out of nowhere actually said that he wanted to sever the mundane in a different way. That was really a joke. Whether I'm worthy or not, I'll only know after I try, Ling Han said, neither servile nor overbearing. Bei Xianming wanted to fly into a rage again. A mere Genesis tier actually dared to speak to him like this? Yet Fu Xiaoyan smiled and said, Then let's do it together. She was very curious about Ling Han, because she could not see through Ling Han at all. It should be known that she had cultivated a celestial technique that did not have much offensive power, yet could see through the facade of others. But she could not see through Ling Han, and there could only be one reason for this. His strength was far above hers. Was this possible? She did not believe it. She was already a king tier among Genesis tiers, so how could there possibly be someone far stronger than her? It should be that Ling Han had cultivated a secret technique that could shield him from her detection. This made her curious, and she wanted to know what kind of secret technique it was. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, Forget it. This one is an eyesore, and this one is also an eyesore. It's better if we go our separate ways. He pointed at Bei Xianming. Bei Xianming almost exploded in fury. He was a first Severance Grand Elder, and only he had the right to be an eyesore with Ling Han. Was this brat treating them as equals? Meanwhile, Fu Xiaoyan smiled daintily, feeling that Ling Han was very interesting. She nodded and said, All right. I hope that you can succeed in severing the mundane in a different way. Same to you, same to you. Ling Han clasped his hands in greeting. By now, he also felt that it was a bit of a pity that Fu Xiaoyan was paired with Bei Xianming. It was obviously a flower that had been stuck in cow dung. Bei Xianming looked at Ling Han coldly, killing intent already overflowing. He was definitely going to find a chance to kill Ling Han. In Ling Han's eyes he merely smiled calmly, as long as he succeeded in severing the mundane. So what if Bei Xianming advanced into the second severance? He could kill him all the same. The two wooden rafts continued to advance, going against the flow of the river. After traveling for a whole 3 days, the source of the river finally appeared ahead of them. Endless river water surged out from a large lake, and in the center of the lake was a massive rock that formed an island at the center of the lake. It was really not easy for them to reach this step. There were many whirlpools along the way, and the slightest mistake could destroy their boat and kill them. Thankfully, their reactions were incredibly quick. Otherwise, even if it was a fourth Severance Grand Elder, it was possible that they would die on the way. In this place, that mysterious mystical power of heaven and earth surged, incredibly abundant. After Fu Xiaoyan and Bei Xianming rowed the wooden raft to the edge of the rock at the center of the lake, the two of them first boarded it, and then stored the wooden raft into their spatial spirit tool. They were going to sever the mundane here. One was going to advance into the celestial level, while the other was going to advance into the second severance. Ling Han and the others also boarded the island at the center of the lake, and similarly stored the wooden raft away. Meanwhile, Small Tower was talking to Ling Han in his mind, telling him that the source water of heaven and earth should be at the bottom of this lake. Now enter the water. Ling Han shook his head. If he entered the water alone, he would be worried about the Empress and Bei Xianming. If they entered into the Black Tower, the Empress would not be able to sever the mundane. Who knew how long it would take to sever the mundane? So how could he waste time? Moreover, he also wanted to sever the mundane. He thought for a moment, and decided to sever the mundane first with the Empress. After severing the mundane, he would go search for the source water of heaven and earth. If he could obtain it, it would be fortunate, and if he could not, so be it. It was fine even if he became a celestial king. But if he missed this chance to sever the mundane, he would have to wait for 10 million years. This was too long. He spoke to the Empress, and the two of them sat down on the island at the center of the lake, beginning to break through to the severing mundane. Though the two of them had already reached the peak stage of the Genesis tier, the severing mundane tier was a completely different beginning. All their previous experience would not be of any help. They could only experience the unique mystical power of heaven and earth here, and then try to control it to strike themselves. Because they had no experience, this was especially dangerous. If they were unlucky, they could strike themselves to death. And the severing mundane pool was one of the best places to sever the mundane. The mystical power of heaven and earth was also extremely powerful, so the might of a strike was naturally astonishing. Ling Han and the others were all trying their best to get used to this kind of mystical power. Because Bei Xianming had already struck once, he appeared to be at ease. Additionally, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was familiarizing herself with this kind of mystical power. There would come a day when she would sever the mundane. This mystical power was emotionless and cold, representing the equality of the heavens. Regardless of whether they were rich or poor, strong or weak, noble or lowly, they were all the same in the heavens. Using this kind of emotionlessness as a blade, they would sever their most cherished mortal bonds, and they would be able to advance into the severing mundane tier. This kind of mystical power was easy to say, but it was really too difficult to do. This kind of mortal bond, emotional bond, was also known as negative karma and obsession. How could it be easily severed? Chapter 1738. The five of them all sat cross-legged, forming two distinct factions, each occupying one side of the island in the center of the lake. Bei Xianming was naturally dissatisfied. Those three were only in the Genesis tier, so how could they compare to him? If not for Fu Xiaoyan's refusal, he really wanted to throw all three of them into the river. He was still relatively satisfied with this beauty. Her status was only slightly inferior to his, and her talent was completely not inferior to his. And because of this, he was clearly far superior in cultivation level, but was willing to give Fu Xiaoyan enough face. He calmed his mind, though a prodigy like him already did not need to come to the severing mundane mystery realm to deliver a second strike. The mystical power of heaven and earth here was endless, and could still reduce some difficulty. Second severance come, he called in his mind. As a man, he naturally had his pride, and always felt that he had to be a level higher than his woman to be mentally balanced. Otherwise, he had not broken through to the second severance, and Fu Xiaoyan had advanced to the first severance. If their cultivation levels were equal, he would feel hurt. Meanwhile, Ling Han, the Empress, and Fu Xiaoyan were all carefully savoring the mystical power of heaven and earth. As long as they mastered it, they could try to sever the mundane. The heaven and earth were emotionless, treating all beings as straw dogs. This embodied a kind of fairness, absolute fairness. No matter what you were, in the eyes of the heavens, there was no distinction between nobility and inferiority, and everyone was treated equally. If you wanted to comprehend Great Tao, then the best way was naturally to harmonize with Great Tao. First, you had to learn the emotionlessness of the heavens, and delivering a strike to yourself, striking on your most cherished mortal bond, was like presenting your allegiance to the heavens. The more thorough this strike was, the higher the degree of harmonization with Great Tao, and the higher the battle prowess would naturally be, and it would be relatively easier to comprehend the regulations of Great Tao in future. However, Ling Han and the others did not want to strike themselves, but to strike the heaven and earth instead. Ling Han sat cross-legged, multiple comprehensions forming in his heart. Striking the heaven and earth, this was only a saying. The true meaning was to separate oneself from the heaven and earth. One was a heaven and earth, and one was the Great Tao. This was not impossible, because the path of a cultivator from weak to strong was actually a process of perfecting one's inner world. Sculpting mountains and rivers, cultivating the sun and moon, forming a river of stars. This was actually a miniature version of a large world, just that there were no Tao laws in it. Therefore, if he wanted to slash the heavens and earth, he would need to draw upon the rules of the heavens and earth, and turn them into the rules of his inner world. Perhaps one day, this inner world would evolve into a true universe. Why is cleaving heaven and earth stronger? One side was severing oneself and becoming the vassal of this world, while the other side was severing the heavens and the earth, becoming an independent entity, which meant that they were equal to this world, at least in terms of level. Wasn't it obvious who was stronger and who was weaker? But the question was how? There was no experience to follow in this, and no one would tell you what you should do. It was just like severing your mortal bonds. No one could tell you how you could sever them either. This was a test that heaven and earth had given to oneself, and one had to completely rely on oneself. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so few severing mundane ancestors in the celestial realm. In theory, as long as they had enough time, the number of people in this group would be enough to make one's hair stand on end. But in reality, there were only about 1,000 severing mundane ancestors, even in a 2-star city, which showed how rare they were. Ling Han and the others simulated various possibilities in their minds. Though they were all extraordinary prodigies, king tiers of the younger generation, it was still extremely difficult to take the step of severing mundane tier, especially if they wanted to strike the heaven and earth. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days later, Fu Xiaoyan suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, her spirit withering. She couldn't help but show an expression of shock. Previously, when she had tried to sever her mundane, she had almost severed her own life. Thankfully, before entering here, she had once received the support of a senior of her clan, which could bear a huge wound in her place. Otherwise, even if she didn't die now, she would be severely wounded. To say nothing of severing mundane tier, merely recuperating would take tens of thousands, or even millions of years. She calmed her mind. Though she had almost died, she had found a sliver of hope in her failure. She firmly believed that she could definitely succeed. She was a supreme king tier, so she could definitely succeed. Out of curiosity, she walked towards Ling Han and the others. She directly ignored the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. This one hadn't even touched the edges of the severing mundane tier. Her main targets were Ling Han and the Empress. Both of them gave her a feeling of unfathomable depth. Under the rule of the Fu clan, When had these two prodigies appeared? And they even knew how to sever the mundane in a different way. Pooh! The Empress suddenly spat out blood. Pa! Her body actually exploded. But what shocked Fu Xiaoran was that this body actually turned into fragments of great Tao, and then immediately disappeared. The Empress reappeared calm and unruffled. Fu Xiaoyan was dumbfounded. What was going on? She had clearly failed to sever her mundane, and had suffered a backlash from the heaven and earth. She had even died once, but why was she perfectly fine? Her eyes were blurred. Impossible, a mighty Genesis tear would have blurred eyes? She naturally wouldn't know that the Empress had formed 9 doppelgangers, and each doppelganger could actually be treated as her true body. Furthermore, they could all be abandoned. In any case, forming another one was only a matter of time. The Empress had failed to strike the heaven and earth the first time, so she used a doppelganger to die in her place, and her true body was completely unscathed. Monster! Fu Xiaoyan was incredibly shocked. Because she was the most outstanding descendant of the clan, the Grand Ancestor did not hesitate to expend his life force to strengthen her, and could die in her place once. But what kind of person was the Grand Ancestor of the Fu clan? He was a supreme elite of the Immortal Palace tier. And not just any Immortal Palace tier, but a big shot of the Immortal Palace tier. What right did this woman have to be able to do it? Could it be that she had a 3-star force behind her? No, the most important thing now was to sever her mundane. She would consider this question later. Fu Xiaoyan hurriedly gathered her thoughts. She could no longer die in her place, so she had to succeed in her next severing of mundane. There definitely wouldn't be another chance. Pooh! But it was at this moment that she felt the Empress's blood explode violently for the second time. Her body exploded again, and then she appeared perfectly fine again. A muscle twitched in her cheek, and she was so shocked that she was rendered speechless. This woman attempted to sever her mundane again, but she still failed. However, she actually had a secret technique that could die in her place. Just which clan's descendant was she? She actually had as many as 2 secret techniques that could die in her place. Fu Xiaoyan's mind was in a mess again. In this area, the Fu clan was the absolute overlord, and only the Fu clan had Immortal Palace tier elites. But now a woman appeared to be even more rich and imposing than her. So how could her mind not be in a mess? She forcibly calmed her mind, but not long after, she saw the Empress vomit blood for the 3rd time, and died again. This time she was completely numb. Even if someone told her that the Empress was actually a descendant of a celestial king, she would probably be able to accept it with ease. Pooh! The sound of vomiting blood was heard again, but this time, it wasn't the Empress but rather Ling Han. Fu Xiaoyan thought that Ling Han didn't have a secret technique that could die in her place like the Empress. But what shocked her even more was that Ling Han actually only wiped the corner of his mouth, and even showed a sliver of a smile. Then he began to break through again. You, Fu Xiaoyan's small mouth was half open, and she felt that everything was so surreal. Are you all right? Ling Han discovered that Fu Xiaoyan was staring at him, and couldn't help but ask. Of course I'm all right. But the problem is, why are you all right as well? Fu Xiaoyan felt like she was about to go crazy. Chapter 1740. / Ling Han and the Empress became more and more anxious as they slashed. Rumble. The sound of thunder became more violent and rapid, as if it was trying to frighten Ling Han and Li Wuyo into stopping their rebellious behavior. But how could Ling Han and the Empress care? The life of a cultivator was to defy the heavens and change their fate. So why did they have to act according to the will of the heavens when they were in the severing mundane tier? Chop 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 boom, a loud boom rang out. Yet it didn't reach their ears. Instead, it exploded in their minds. Everyone in the severing mundane pool felt their minds tremble. And those who had been on the verge of failure in severing their mundane were actually put back on the right track. They didn't know what was going on. They just thought that it was a gift from the heavens, and they were all pleasantly surprised. This was because Ling Han and the Empress were about to succeed in striking the heaven and earth, causing an indescribable change in the mysteries of the heavens, causing the severing mundane to become much easier. Of course, the mysteries of the heavens were ever-changing, and it was possible that the next time this saber strike would become even more difficult. Ling Han and the Empress opened their eyes at the same time, and a powerful aura surged out from their bodies, soaring into the sky. Wang! This kind of aura transformed into two pillars of light, and even those outside the severing mundane pool could clearly see them. What's going on? A great many people had been waiting outside the entire time, and there were also some who had retreated midway. There were also an extremely small number of people who had already completed the severing mundane tier, and had returned outside. Severing the mundane by striking the heaven and earth was something that had never happened before, at least in the territory of 3-star forces. Thus, no one knew that this was a unique way of severing the mundane, and that even the heaven and earth had undergone a mysterious change. On the island in the center of the lake, thunderclouds began to gather, and the heavenly tribulation condensed once more. Ling Han and the Empress stood on either side of the island, so that they wouldn't accidentally be swept into the other's heavenly tribulation. This heavenly tribulation is terrifying. They had achieved the Tao by severing the heavens and earth. This was something that the heavens and earth would not allow, because they had severed their connection with the heavens and earth. From then on, they would no longer be under the control of the heavens and earth. Heaven and earth wanted to destroy such an existence. Even so, the heavenly tribulation still had to abide by certain rules. At the very least, it was impossible for a dividing soul-level heavenly punishment to descend. Otherwise, no one in the world would be able to survive it. The might of this heavenly tribulation was comparable to a second severance elite. Unfortunately, both Ling Han and the Empress had cultivated the true pinnacle level in the Eternal River tier. This meant that after they advanced into the severing mundane tier, they would be invincible king tiers among their peers. And now that they had successfully struck the heaven and earth, the combination of these two factors allowed them to be invincible, even if they were a whole cultivation level above them. A second severance elite was nothing. They clashed with the heavenly tribulation. Ling Han was even more exaggerated. He actively guided the heavenly tribulation into his body and tempered his divine bones. Half a day later, the two of them stopped at almost the same time. They looked at each other and could feel the invincible confidence in each other's eyes. A flawless severance, they all said. Even if it was a strike that struck the heaven and earth, there were still different levels, and the strike could be light or heavy. For example, both Ling Han and the Empress had completely severed their connection with the heaven and earth, and there was not the slightest bit of connection. That was why they were able to go against a small realm and still be invincible. But this would also bring about a problem, and that was that it would become incredibly difficult for them to comprehend Great Tao in future, because they had already severed their connection with the heaven and earth. The Great Tao of heaven and earth would also be incompatible with them, and it would be too difficult to comprehend it. Thankfully, they had the reincarnation tree, which could completely make up for this shortcoming. Moreover, in theory, the lifespan of a severing mundane tier was unlimited. It's time to collect that source water. Ling Han smiled. If he waited until he had advanced to the severing mundane tier before entering the water, he would actually have a greater chance of success. The might of the 9 heavens flame was now completely linked to his cultivation level. The stronger he was, the stronger the 9 heavens flame would be. This was his source flame. "I'll wait for you," the Empress said gently. Her gentleness would only bloom for one person. Ling Han's heart involuntarily swayed. He nodded and said, "You two wait here. It shouldn't be long." If he could collect it, he would. And if he couldn't, he wouldn't force it. He could come again in future. The two women nodded. Because they knew that Ling Han had the Black Tower, they weren't that worried. Ling Han channeled the 9 heavens flame. Boom! Blazing white flames appeared around his body, and one could clearly feel the patterns of Great Tao pulsating. Regulations materialized, exuding a might that would make even dividing soul tier elites' hearts palpitate. By now, the 9 heavens flame had also advanced into celestial level, and from celestial level onward, its might was finally manifested. Ling Han wrapped himself in the 9 heavens flame, and suddenly jumped into the lake. If others saw this scene, they would definitely exclaim that he was a madman. Wasn't this seeking death? But in the next moment, they would be stunned, because under the cover of the 9 heavens flame, the lake water actually didn't invade Ling Han's body. The nine heavens flame resisted the might of the source water. This wasn't a clash of cultivation levels, but rather a clash of cultivation levels. One was the ancestral fire, and the other was the source water. They were both the most fundamental things of the celestial realm, and there was no difference in level. The restriction of the 5 elements was also useless here. At the level of source, every regulation was actually equal, just like how the regulation of time was high above the celestial king tier. But when one truly reached the celestial king tier, it actually wouldn't be stronger than the regulations of wood or fire. Thus, the nine heavens flame wasn't restricted by the source water. Ling Han dove deep into the lake, but this lake was frighteningly deep. He dove down for a whole 2 days and 2 nights, but still didn't reach the bottom. Going down, it was still a stretch of darkness, as if there was no bottom. Ling Han calculated the time. He could dive down for another 8 days at most, and then he definitely had to swim back. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him, the Empress, and the others to leave the severing mundane pool within the time limit of 3 months. At that time, the violent power of heaven and earth would wreak havoc, and even celestial kings would frown, and they could only spend 10 million years in the Black Tower. How could this do? 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. When it came to the 6th day, Ling Han finally reached the bottom. Under the guidance of Small Tower, he discovered a cave at the bottom of the lake. After entering, the water level actually slowly decreased, and finally actually formed a stream. He could walk on the side, and even without the protection of the nine heavens flame, he didn't have to worry about being corroded by the lake water. Another half a day later, a small pool appeared in front of him. There was a puddle of water in the pool, but it was like a jellyfish lightly wriggling there. And there was actually a person lying on the side of the pool. This stream was precisely formed by the aura flowing out of his body. Ling Han couldn't help but be stunned. This person's aura actually turned into a river, and even a celestial king frowned. Just how strong was this person? I actually guessed wrong, Small Tower said. That was a celestial king, and he clearly came here to collect the source water. However, he didn't succeed, and instead died here. His aura turned into a river of regulations, and aside from celestial kings, only those who have grasped the source power of heaven and earth can come here. Ling Han nodded, then his expression darkened, and he almost jumped up. So you don't know at all, yet you want me to jump into the fire pit? This guy said that the nine heavens flame could resist the source water. But this wasn't the fuck you source water at all, but rather the regulations of a celestial king. Chapter 1741. Ho ho. Small Tower laughed. Ling Han was driven mad for a while, but could do nothing. This Small Tower was like a dead pig that was not afraid of boiling water. So what could he do to it? Go get that celestial king, Small Tower egged him on. Logically speaking, even if a celestial king cannot obtain the source water, it is impossible that he will die and be able to retreat unscathed. Ling Han was curious as well. He slowly approached. With the blazing of the nine heavens flame, he could resist the pressure of a celestial king. Otherwise, he could not possibly come here at all, and would have long since been killed by the corrosion of the river. This celestial king was a male, and wore a long purple and gold robe. This should have been woven from incredibly high-quality materials, but under the endless corrosion of the celestial king's aura, it was already tattered and could no longer be used. He was different from ordinary people, and had a vertical eye on his forehead, but it had been pierced through. And this was also a fatal blow, directly entering the mind and destroying his spirit. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. So what if he was as strong as a celestial king? He would still encounter a strong enemy, and could not escape the fate of death. There are words on the ground. On the side of this celestial king's right hand, there were a few symbols carved. When Ling Han walked over, there was instantly a string of thoughts flashing through his mind, intermittently narrating some things. Ling Han couldn't help but be shocked. It was just a few symbols, and they could actually convey so many things. As expected of a celestial king, this method was too shocking. This celestial king was respectfully called the Multitude Beast Celestial King when he was alive. The Multitude Beast Celestial King cultivated the Water Great Tao, and created his own Celestial King technique. He could transform water regulations into battle beasts, and when he fought, 10,000 beasts would charge, each possessing the same level of battle prowess as him. However, the most frightening thing was still the 10 battle beasts that he raised. Their battle prowess was not only the same level as his, but was also only slightly inferior to his main body. With this Celestial King technique, he could be said to be invincible in the second heaven of the Celestial King tier. Unfortunately, he encountered a powerful opponent, the Imperial Void Celestial King, and his spirit was forcibly severed by the latter. However, an immortal king was an immortal king after all. Even though he was only left with a shell, the myriad beasts' immortal king still came here, hoping to obtain the source water of heaven and earth to nurture his spirit. He had become an immortal king through the laws of water, so theoretically, there was a slight possibility of this happening. However, he failed in the end and fell at the last step. Those who can become immortal kings are all supreme geniuses who have stood out in the river of time. All of them are kings. Ling Han sighed. No wonder he's so unwilling. But why is it the Imperial Void Immortal King again? Back then, the Celestial King Grand Elder of the Chung clan had gone missing after the Great Battle, due to a difference in ideology. Meanwhile, the Chung clan had been massacred by another Celestial King, the Imperial Void Celestial King. Ling Han would never believe that there were two Celestial Kings in the Celestial Realm, who were both titled Imperial Void Realm. This is the same Immortal King. This Celestial King is quite active. How many Celestial Kings has he killed? Could he be a Celestial King killer? Ling Han mumbled to himself. He rummaged through his memories. Just now, the myriad beasts' Immortal King had sent over a lot of memories, but they were fragmented, and the information was not very complete. Imperial Void Celestial King, Sealed Emotion Palace, Heavenly Venerable Feng Qing. Ling Han stroked his chin. There was very little information about the Imperial Void Celestial King, but he seemed to have a lot to do with the two words Sealed Emotion. Did he come from the Sealed Emotion Palace? But what the hell is this Heavenly Venerable Feng Qing? Don't say his name. Small Tower suddenly called out, appearing incredibly excited. Why? Ling Han was puzzled. Never say the true name of a Heavenly Venerable, or else it will draw out his divine sense. No matter how vast the celestial realm is, his divine sense will immediately manifest and reach everywhere. Small Tower said in an unprecedentedly cautious tone. Ling Han pursed his lips and said, "This is only a title. I don't know his true name." Small Tower was still excited, and repeatedly warned that it was best not to even mention his title. Otherwise, if the other just happened to make a prediction on a whim, then he would still be able to see through everything. Hey, what exactly is this person's background? I've never seen you so excited before. Ling Han asked curiously. You don't need to know now. You only need to cultivate properly. Also forget this matter, or it will not do you any good. Small Tower warned. Ling Han chuckled and said, You know, I've always been a very curious person. The more you say that, the more I want to know. Ling Han. Small Tower raised its voice. Don't provoke him, or I won't be able to save you even if I risk destroying my tool and scattering my spirit. So serious? Ling Han's expression finally became solemn, and he said, All right, I won't ask now, but you at least have to tell me when I'm qualified to know the truth. Small Tower paused and said, Celestial King. Only a Celestial King was qualified to know the truth. Hiss. Ling Han nodded and said, All right, then we'll talk about it when I'm a Celestial King. He had already advanced into the severing mundane tier, and started the smooth path to celestial level. Becoming a Celestial King was only a matter of time. He was that confident. Now, how do I collect the source water? He asked. Small Tower waved lightly, and said, That's the Xianin source water of the 9 great source water. Extremely een and extremely cold. Wrap yourself with the 9 heavens flame, and then try to form a resonance with it. Oh right, you might as well circulate the indestructible heavens scroll. Next it's up to luck. If the Xianin source water can acknowledge you, it will automatically enter your body, and become your source power. Otherwise, the Xianin source water will break out of this place and leave, finding another place to hide. Ling Han nodded. He circulated the 9 heavens flame again and walked towards that pool. After walking a few steps closer, he immediately discovered that the temperature was beginning to drop at a crazy rate. But the Xianin source water was actually still in a liquid form, which was really amazing. Here the patterns of Great Tao intertwined. This was Celestial King tier level. And if it were not for the fact that Ling Han still had the protection of the 9 heavens flame, he would be instantly killed. He walked very slowly, even with the help of the 9 heavens flame. If he moved a little too quickly, the patterns of Great Tao would still be able to break through the defenses of the 9 heavens flame and sever his physical body and soul. Finally, he walked to the edge of the pool. That jellyfish-like thing seemed to have a mind of its own and showed signs of retreating, as if it was going to break through the air and leave. Ling Han hurriedly circulated the indestructible heavens scroll. The source power of heaven and earth could not be forcibly collected, at least with his current abilities, so he could only use a softer method. Come. Once the indestructible heavens scroll was circulated, a golden light immediately spread out on Ling Han's body. But this time was different from before. The images of immortal phoenixes, heaven dragons, black tortoises, giant golden ants, and so on clearly appeared. These were all immortal beasts, and they were all Celestial King tier level. The indestructible heaven scroll was formed by extracting the source techniques of these Celestial King beasts, and then fusing it with the comprehension of a supreme ultimate elite. The Xianin source water immediately quieted down. It obviously did not have eyes, but Ling Han had a feeling that it was staring at that black tortoise. That was the 1,000 transformations tortoise water element. Xiao, the Xianin source water flashed, and had already arrived at the center of Ling Han's palm. Then, it burrowed up along Ling Han's palm, passing through his arm to his shoulder, and then made a detour downwards, to his heart, and then to his dantian. And in this process, Ling Han's body was completely sealed in ice. Chapter 1742. Xianin source water, the most and coldest water in the world. Though it was attracted by Ling Han, or rather attracted by the 1,000 transformations tortoise in the indestructible heaven scroll, entering his body, it was not docile at all. As it passed, it completely froze Ling Han. Thankfully, there was still the 9 heavens flame in Ling Han's body, which could resist the Xianin source water and protect Ling Han's life force. Otherwise, even if the Xianin source water had no intention of killing him, it would sever every bit of his life force in the process. Then Ling Han would be too wronged. In Ling Han's dantian, 2 great source powers of heaven and earth were currently engaged in a fierce battle. The 9 heavens flame originally dominated Ling Han's dantian, but now the Xianin source water interfered, also wanting to occupy a position. This naturally caused the two to begin fighting. You won't submit to me, and I won't submit to you. In this way, Ling Han naturally suffered. These two were both bosses, existences that could rival celestial kings in essence. If they really flew into a rage, Ling Han would definitely be insta-killed. Now that the two were in a confrontation, every sliver of power that leaked out was incredibly terrifying, causing great misfortune to Ling Han's body. After advancing into the severing mundane tier, Ling Han's physique naturally rose another level, approaching the height of 2-star pseudo-divine metal. In the celestial realm, there were a total of 10 levels of pseudo-divine metal, and 2-star pseudo-divine metal was actually equivalent to the level of 3rd severance. Similarly, 3-star pseudo-divine metal would jump to Yang Soul level. But such a physique was not even worth mentioning in front of 2 great source powers, and instantly tormented Ling Han until he was about to collapse. He hurriedly entered into the Black Tower, wanting to use the power of the Black Tower to suppress these 2 guys. At least, it could slightly alleviate the pain, and he would not be in so much pain. Wang. The Black Tower also began to exude power, suppressing towards the 2 source powers of heaven and earth. The 9 heavens flame was fine. It was a part of Ling Han's body in the first place, and under the suppression of the Black Tower, not only did it not resist, it even helped the Black Tower suppress the Xianin source water. But the Xianin source water was a source power of heaven and earth, so how could it be easily subdued? It started a fierce resistance, wanting to monopolize Ling Han's dantian. This was the pride that belonged to source powers of heaven and earth. So how could it be easily subdued? Ling Han unleashed his full power and began to refine the Xianing source water. Only by making it a part of his body would he no longer reject the idea of sharing a nest with the Nine Heavens flame. But even if he had the help of the Black Tower and the Nine Heavens flame, it was still incredibly difficult for him to suppress the Xianing source water. This was a precious treasure of Celestial King Tyr. So how could it be easily subdued? This was a tug of war. Ling Han refined the Xianing source water bit by bit, and his body continued to freeze. In the first place, he had been a block of ice, and now he had even more so become an ice mountain, wrapping him tightly within. Ling Han was not worried. The refinement of the Xianing source water was progressing at an orderly pace. As long as he succeeded, he would be able to easily melt this ice mountain. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time continued to pass. On the 5th day, Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes. Ka ka ka. Innumerable cracks suddenly appeared on the ice mountain, and then it shattered with a loud bang. Ling Han's figure shook, and he walked out from the shattered ice. Wherever his feet passed, the shattered ice actually automatically turned into water, and was then absorbed into his body. The Xianing source water had already become his source power, and thus, he had also become the mother of all waters in the world. Of course, due to the limitation of cultivation level, no matter if it was the Nine Heavens flame or the Xianing source water, their might was limited, but as long as Ling Han's cultivation level increased, the might of the two source powers would naturally rise as well. What kind of concept was this? When Ling Han became a celestial king, it would be equivalent to him merging another 2 celestial kings into his body, and his battle prowess would be indescribably strong. This is really a great harvest. Ling Han showed a faint smile. Aside from perfectly advancing into the severing mundane tier, he had also obtained the core secret of a celestial king technique. In the future, when he cultivated it, he would be able to form 10 battle beasts, and lastly, the Xianing source water. More importantly, this secret technique of the myriad beast celestial king was very creative, because he could merge source power into celestial beasts. The myriad beast celestial king had not obtained any source power of heaven and earth like ancestral fire or source water, but being able to become a celestial king, his own source power was not weaker than the source power of heaven and earth, and the two were equal. Thus, he merged a portion of his own source power into the battle beasts, causing the might of the battle beasts to be extremely astonishing. But the problem was that the myriad beast celestial king would also lose a portion of his source power, because of this, which would cause his own battle prowess to weaken. It was precisely because of this that the myriad beast celestial king had gone to search for the source water of heaven and earth. This was compatible with the source power that he cultivated. Firstly, his might would be greater after refining it, and secondly, it was more likely that he would obtain the acknowledgement of the source power of heaven and earth. He had indeed found the Xianing source water, but due to various reasons, he had not managed to collect it in time. Only when he had been killed by the Imperial Void Celestial King did his broken body come here to collect the Xianing source water. But in the end, he had not succeeded. But Ling Han did not have this problem. Merely presently, he already possessed 2 source powers of heaven and earth, and this meant that if he learned this celestial technique, his might would far surpass that of its creator. If I could obtain even more source powers of heaven and earth in the future, just how powerful would I be? Ling Han couldn't help but mutter to himself. If there is a chance, do your best to collect as many source powers of heaven and earth as possible before advancing into the celestial king tier. Small Tower suddenly said. Is there anything to pay attention to? Ling Han asked. The more source powers of heaven and earth you obtain, then when you advance into the celestial king tier, the more source power you would be able to absorb. This would be an extremely huge boost to your battle prowess, and there would also be a chance for you to break through to the 9th heaven celestial king tier. Otherwise, if you only relied on your own strength to break through, that would be too difficult, Small Tower said solemnly. So that was how it was. Ling Han nodded. He would remember this carefully in his heart. Now, however, he had to leave this place. Calculating the time, it was about time. When he left, he still needed to use the Nine Heavens flame, or the Xianing source water, to resist the corrosion of the celestial king tier aura. 8 days later he broke out of the water. Ling Han, the Empress and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden both breathed a sigh of relief. Ling Han had disappeared for 20 days, and even if they were filled with confidence in Ling Han, they could not help but be worried. Only when they saw him now did they finally breathe a sigh of relief. Ling Han broke into a grin and said, "I've made you too worry. Let's go." "Where's the source water?" the Empress asked. Ling Han waved a hand. Wang. An extremely cold air suddenly descended, completely freezing the surrounding air. In this domain, Ling Han was fully deserving of the title of King of Ice. When they saw this scene, the Empress and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were both pleasantly surprised. They released the wooden raft and began to head back. This time, Ling Han urged the wooden raft even faster. The time limit of 3 months was already approaching, and even the rivers had become violent and rapid. Occasionally, there would be splashes of water. If one was touched by the slightest bit, it was guaranteed that even a celestial king would frown. That was because this was the regulations of a second heaven celestial king, and its might would not decrease because of his death. Fortunately, Ling Han presently grasped 2 kinds of source powers of heaven and earth, and it was enough to resist. After all, this was also a celestial king that had long since died. His strength lay in his regulations, and not in his true battle prowess. A few days later, they finally exited the Severing Mundane Pool. At this time, almost everyone had left. By now, those that had not exited the Severing Mundane Pool were basically not likely to appear again. Ling Han. A voice filled with killing intent traveled over. They saw a white-faced, beardless elder staring fixedly at the 3 of them. Ding Xing, a Severing Mundane ancestor of the Ding clan, second severance. Chapter 1744. Ding Xing was shocked, his figure retreating quickly, but as the ice closed in, his movements became incredibly slow. The Empress charged over and struck out with her palm. Peng Ding Xing's body immediately exploded into tens of thousands of pieces like an ice sculpture. There was definitely not a single drop of blood spilled. Xianing source water, the coldest in the world. However, a second severance Grand Elder would not die so easily. Ding Xing's spirit left his body, wanting to escape. His spirit turned into a small person the size of a fist, and once it left his body, its speed was extremely fast. Without the support of a physical shell, the spirit was an extremely dangerous thing. A Severing Mundane ancestor would not die, but their spirit was relatively weak, and could be easily hunted by others. What was the point of hunting? Firstly, directly refining it could extract a cultivator's lifetime comprehension of regulations from it. Secondly, it could be sealed into some forbidden tool, and become a one-time explosive killing tool. Its might extremely powerful. Additionally, the refinement of some alchemical pills also required the spirit to complete a certain regulation. But the spirit was extremely difficult to capture, and without the burden of the physical body, its speed was astonishingly fast. Being able to live as long as heaven and earth was extremely difficult to reach, but it was similarly very difficult to die. The Empress humphed coldly and pointed a finger. Xiao sword light swept out, its speed even faster. Pa! Ding Xing's soul shattered and transformed into a firework that drifted in all directions. A second severance elite dead. The Empress and Ling Han exchanged a look. They were both king tiers among second severance, and now that the 2 of them had joined forces, it would be unreasonable if they still could not kill Ding Xing in a few moves. Let's go find the others first. I wonder if Chang Liangsun and those guys have fought, Ling Han said. The 3 of them left, heading towards Moon Scattering City. Why didn't the Black Tower open the 7th level? Ling Han suddenly remembered. I don't know either. Small Tower was slightly confused. After you advanced into the Severing Mundane tier, I gained some more memories, but at the same time, there were some more mysteries. Now I can be sure of one thing, and that is that I know who I am. Weren't you the Tsundra Tower? You mean you know the Black Tower's real name? Ling Han asked. The Black Tower was something he had casually come up with. It sounded completely black, so he gave it such a name. In reality, he didn't know much about the Black Tower. Small Tower nodded. My original name is the Tower of Three Realms. Clang, there was a sudden clap of thunder, as if heaven and earth were shaking. Ling Han couldn't help but be startled. This should be the reaction of the heavens to the Tower of Three Realms. There were some things that could affect the heavens and earth, and when their names were directly called, the heavens and earth would react. It was said that immortal kings were such existences. Directly calling out the name of a living immortal king would cause a great commotion. But the problem was, his conversation with Small Pagoda was limited to the sea of consciousness. The Tower of Three Realms is so awesome. Don't think about this name again, and don't say it out loud. This would attract the attention of a few truly powerful figures. They would be able to do so with a single thought. When Black had landed in the lower realm, was it to avoid the divine sense of these powerful figures? Hold on, previously, the Azura Demon Emperor had said that the lower realm had long since entered the immortal realm through opening the sky, yet had descended back into a small world. This had drawn the great curiosity of both the immortal realm and the netherworld, which was why the Azura Demon Emperor and countless other elites of the immortal level had entered the various small worlds. Could it be that the Black Tower, or the previous owner of the Black Tower, felt that throwing the Black Tower into the immortal realm wasn't safe enough, so they deliberately shoved the Black Tower back to the next level? But why did he have to bring a small world along? Wouldn't it be more discreet if you just entered some small world? Ling Han asked Small Pagoda. But Small Pagoda did not know anything. Since there was no answer, Ling Han decided not to waste any more time. The three of them quickly returned to Moonshine City. Ling Han did not need to deliberately inquire about the major events that had happened in the past few days, because this was the hottest topic at the moment. Changsun Liang, Xiao Sheng, Song Ji, Ma Yin, and the other young king tiers had all successfully advanced to the Severing Mundane tier, and they had also participated in several major battles. The first match, Changsun Liang against Xiao Sheng, was a draw. The second match, Song Ji against Changsun Liang, was also a draw. The third match, Ma Yin and Xiao Sheng battled for 3 days and 3 nights, and ended with Ma Yin losing by a small move. Just from these results, the battle prowess of the top prodigies were all about equal. Even if Ma Yin had lost by a small move, it could have been caused by various minor factors. It could not be said that her strength was really the weakest among the 4 of them. Moreover, sparring was different from a fierce battle of life and death. Everyone definitely had many ultimate moves that they had not used. Moreover, some young elites had also appeared. Though they were slightly inferior to Changsun Liang and the others, they could still be called prodigies. Moreover, the path of cultivation was still long, so it was not impossible for them to surpass them. These were all things that had already happened, and there was a grand event that had not happened yet, and that was that the Fu clan would host a great banquet tomorrow night, and invite all the prodigies that had successfully broken through in the Severing Mundane pool this time. There were some prodigies that were definitely worth recruiting, such as Changsun Liang, Xiao Sheng, and so on. The Fu clan was not self-contained, and would often recruit prodigies into the Fu clan, and these prodigies were also willing to join a 3-star force. Although there was only a difference of 1 star between 3 stars and 2 stars, the difference was practically like the difference between heaven and earth. For example, Changsun Liang was very outstanding, but if he did not receive the full nurturing of a 3-star force, the possibility of him advancing into the Immortal Palace tier was practically zero. The inheritance of martial art was the accumulation of innumerable years and the crystallization of the wisdom of innumerable elites. It was far too difficult to rely on one's own strength to break through to a completely new cultivation level. The word king tier only represented that one had talent in cultivation and battle prowess that was invincible among those of the same cultivation level. But it did not represent that one's creativity had advanced to a completely new and unknown level that would require one to create their own cultivation technique. And this actually had nothing to do with being a king tier. Thus, this ticket to the Fu clan was something that everyone wanted to obtain. There were many that could go to the Fu clan this time, because Ling Han and the Empress had successfully advanced into Dao through striking the heaven and earth, causing some kind of change in the mysteries of heaven, making it relatively easier to sever the mundane this time. Those that originally had no hope had also successfully severed the mundane now, and those that could only barely sever the mundane now could only sever the ordinary mundane. And there were even a few that had achieved a flawless severance. However, a flawless severance was the limit, and it was impossible that they could achieve a different kind of mundane severance because of this. All in all, there were a total of 272 people who could attend the Fu clan's banquet, and each of them could bring a companion with them. Of course, the great banquet would not be held at the Fu clan's residence. That would be too far away. Instead, it would be held at the Sky Dome Mountain outside of Moon Scattering City. This was relatively close to the few nearby cities, because the Fu clan did not only want to recruit people under the rule of the Black Moon sect. Ling Han felt that he could go to the Fu clan and use the resources of the Fu clan to find the whereabouts of the Rock Palace. Thus, he and the Empress rested for a day, and then hurried over to Cheonglong Mountain. There was a small stone door at the foot of the mountain, and there was a large group of people surrounding the door. Some people could enter, and as soon as they stepped through the stone door, they would immediately disappear. Ling Han suddenly realized that this was a spatial artifact. However, there were people guarding the door. If you wanted to enter, you had to show your invitation first. We don't have an invitation, so how can we enter? The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden asked. Chapter 1745. Just swaggerin' like this, Ling Han said with a smile. He held a woman in each hand, and then pushed through the crowd, striding forward. Under the pressure of his aura, the people in front could only move aside. After all, those outside were only Genesis tiers, and hadn't severing mundane tiers already entered? Of course, even if they were severing mundane tiers, there wouldn't be many that could resist Ling Han's aura. Invitation. The guard was a middle-aged man, and his severing mundane tier cultivation was enough to suppress all troublemakers. As expected of the Fu clan, so rich and imposing, even the guards were so extravagant, using a severing mundane ancestor. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I just came out of the severing mundane pool, and didn't receive an invitation. The middle-aged man glanced at Ling Han, his eyes filled with suspicion. Just came out. The severing mundane pool had already closed, so he didn't believe that you came out at such a coincidental time. He thought that Ling Han should have broken through to the severing mundane tier long ago, and came here to swindle. Because the Fu clan only wanted prodigies, they naturally only accepted king tiers that had proven their Dao in the severing mundane pool. Otherwise, if they were barely ordinary severing mundane tiers, what was the point of recruiting them? It would be a waste of resources. Those that entered today might not be able to board the Fu clan's ship. Only prodigies that had a perfect severance might appear among them, and that was the target of the Fu clan. Hee, if you don't have an invitation, then please leave, the middle-aged man said with a smile, and didn't speak ill of Ling Han. This was also the bearing of a noble clan. Otherwise, the servants that came from the smaller the clan, the more arrogant they would be. Ling Han wasn't angered and said with a smile, Please report to Miss Fu Xiaoyan. Even the exquisite fairy of the Fu clan is interested in him. The middle-aged man showed an expression of displeasure. Fu Xiaoyan was too outstanding, and advancing into the severing mundane tier was only the beginning. Her future achievements would definitely be at the Immortal Palace tier, and the only difference was whether she could become a big shot of the Immortal Palace tier. This was also something that could be imagined. What a shameless toad. Sir, if you continue to pester, then forgive me for not being polite, the middle-aged man said coldly. Did you hear that? Scram. A proud voice came from behind. Everyone went over. It was a young man with an insufferably arrogant expression. His name was Ning Hao, and he was a newcomer who had just completed the severing mundane tier. At first, he could only sever the mundane in an ordinary manner, but because of the influence of the mysteries of heaven, he encountered a stroke of luck. His saber strike was very thorough, and he achieved a flawless severance. This naturally caused him to be insufferably arrogant. What Changsun Liang and Xiaosheng? Weren't they all the same as him? All of them had achieved a flawless severance. Therefore, his confidence swelled, and he felt like he was the strongest heaven's favorite in the world. He knew that both Ling Han and the Empress were in the severing mundane tier. But so what? They had definitely severed their mundane in some remote corner. How could they compare to his flawless severance? There was another woman beside him. She was very beautiful, but equally arrogant. Her slender hand was wrapped around Ning Hao's arm, and her chin was raised high, her nostrils almost pointing towards the sky. Ling Han turned around, frowned, and said, "Do you know how to speak human language? If you don't know how to speak, then shut your dog mouth." When everyone heard this, they only felt that Ling Han was domineering. Though Ning Hao was very arrogant, Ling Han wasn't going to be polite either, directly calling him a dog. But then again, who would feel comfortable being told to fuck off for no reason? You're courting death. Ning Hao's eyes turned cold, but when his eyes swept over the Empress and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, he couldn't help but smirk coldly and said, "Two beauties, do you want to attend the Fu clan's banquet? It's simple. As long as you dump that man, I'll take you in." "Brother Hao, then what about me?" The woman beside him immediately jumped up. According to the rules, each person could only bring one companion. Ning Hao sneered and retracted his arm. He coldly said, "You can fuck off now. This kind of trash. It was enough to just play around." Could it be that she hoped to hook up with him and become a phoenix? The woman was dazed for a moment and immediately screamed, "Ning Hao, you're really heartless. You won't have a good ending." Ning Hao's expression darkened, and killing intent appeared in his eyes. This woman actually dared to speak of their relationship in public, and in such a vulgar manner at that. "Fuck off." The Empress was enraged. Shwa, a slap shot out at Ning Hao. Boom, her jade-white palm shot out, and origin power condensed into a small, exquisite hand that slapped out at Ning Hao's face. Ling Han couldn't help but nod. The Empress's control over power had already reached an extremely precise level. Other elites would casually transform into a giant hand that blotted out the sky. This was because their power was too strong, and after origin power condensed, it would naturally become large. It was very simple, but to control the hand formed from origin power to be as small as possible, that would require an extremely high level of control over power. After advancing into the severing mundane tier, the Empress finally succeeded. Wielding something heavy, as if it were lightning, Hao scoffed. "I've given you a chance because your figure is not bad, but have you become so arrogant that you've forgotten who you are?" He similarly shot out a palm that transformed into at least the size of a house, and greeted the Empress. This was true power, the mighty power that had formed after a perfect severing of mundane. Boom! This palm of his triggered a clap of thunder. A severing mundane ancestor was naturally strong. Regulations shone, and there was a kind of supreme aura that mortals could only worship. The Empress's palm shot out, and her small jade-like palm sank into that large hand. It was like a grain of rice thrown into water, completely unremarkable, and there was no reaction at all. But it was only an instant, and this large hand on the outside actually shattered with a loud bang. The regulations were also completely annihilated at the first instant. That exquisite, jade-like hand reappeared, and pressed down at Ning Hao, perfect and flawless. Instantly Ning Hao's face paled. They exchanged a palm strike, but the power of his palm completely shattered, while the power of the others was practically unaffected. Was there still justice in this world? Just how great was the gap in strength for it to be like this? Pung! He had not finished this thought when he was already sent flying by a palm strike, and directly fainted. "Pay!" The woman from before walked over, and spat at Ning Hao before swaggering off. Ling Han didn't do anything either. Even the Empress could be called a king tier among second severance. So what was there to make a fuss about knocking this kind of trash over? He cracked a smile at the middle-aged man and said, "Do me a favor." The middle-aged man was already stunned. He was also a first severance, so he naturally knew that Ning Hao was no weakling, and that his strength was considerably strong. But even so, the other was still directly smacked into an idiot by a single palm strike. He hurriedly changed his attitude and said, "Please, the three of you." The other should not be lying. And he had indeed just come out from the severing mundane pool. Otherwise, if he had not severed his mundane there, how could his strength be so strong? Ling Han nodded at him, and the three of them walked through the stone door together. Suddenly, the scenery in front of them changed, and they entered into a massive space. There were mountains and rivers just like a small world. With just a few more glances, Ling Han could confirm that this was definitely a spatial god tool that had been directly refined with a small world as its foundation. What a grand gesture! "Please, the three of you." There was someone waiting respectfully inside, and when he saw Ling Han and his group appear, he immediately made a gesture of invitation. Ling Han and his group followed behind him, and immediately another person took over that person's position, continuing to receive guests here. This was really a small world, and the power of regulations here was too weak. Even though the person guiding them was only in the Genesis tier, a single step was a few 100 million miles, and with only 2 or 3 steps, he had already led them to the front of a dazzling golden palace. "The three of you, the banquet will be held in the palace, so please head over on your own." That person turned around. He still had to continue his work of leading the way. Ling Han was just about to walk forward, yet he sniffed with his nose and turned towards a row of courtyards at the side of the palace. Chapter 1746. What attracted Ling Han's attention was a medicinal fragrance. As the alchemy emperor, perhaps he couldn't be called an alchemy elite now, but he was definitely a prodigy. He could sense the slightest scent and followed it all the way. This was a celestial pill. At first, he had only come here to eat and drink, and Ling Han didn't have much interest, but there was actually someone concocting pills here. This made him curious, and he wanted to see the person who was concocting pills. Now that he had advanced into the severing mundane tier, he was qualified to concoct celestial pills. The Empress was proud, and thought that all beings in this world should submit to her and Ling Han. Even if they didn't submit now, they would have to submit in future. Thus, she naturally didn't mind Ling Han barging in like this. From her point of view, this was all too logical. Meanwhile, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden was slightly nervous. After all, this was the territory of the Fu clan, and who knew how many elites were hidden in this small world. Ling Han pushed open the door and entered. This courtyard was very quiet, so quiet that there wasn't even anyone patrolling. True, this was a spatial god tool in the first place, and normally, no one would come in, so why would there be a need to specially send someone to guard it? Moreover, everyone was heading towards the palace now, so who would be interested in this unremarkable courtyard? Finally, Ling Han arrived at a massive room. It was very spacious, and there was only an alchemy furnace in the center. It was 30 meters tall, and it didn't look like a furnace at all, but rather a tower. Below the alchemy furnace, flames blazed, and an old man was continuously circling around the alchemy furnace. With every turn, he would deliver a palm strike, and regulations of flames would surge. The alchemy furnace would also respond, and multiple seals would appear. This old man completely ignored Ling Han and his group. His figure spun rapidly like a ghost. Ling Han frowned and said, "Not good, something bad is about to happen." When his words fell, the old man's footsteps also slowed, sweat rolling down his forehead. The entire alchemy furnace also trembled lightly, as if it was about to explode. "Hurry up and help!" The old man immediately called out. How to help? Although Ling Han was an alchemy genius, he had never refined an immortal pill before. So how would he know how to refine an immortal pill? However, to be called the Alchemy Emperor, Ling Han wasn't just for show. It didn't matter if he didn't know how to concoct immortal pills. He just needed to understand the Elder's movements. In the end, alchemy was all about the control of flames. Of course, pharmacology was also extremely important, but it had nothing to do with Ling Han right now. The change in the furnace's flame would determine whether or not the pill would explode. And now, the problem was that the pill furnace might explode. Thus, this was something that Ling Han could do. After a few glances, he immediately made his move. Pa. He also continuously attacked the pill furnace, and the 9 heavens flames surged. This was the reason why he dared to attack. In the beginning, his movements were a little sluggish, but he immediately became proficient. Every move he made showed his foundation. This was the comprehension of the Alchemy Emperor. Of course, he was only following the old man. Without the old man leading the way, he would not be able to continue. The old man was very busy. Not only did he have to adjust the temperature of the flames, he also had to interweave the medicinal properties of the medicinal ingredients. If he was alone, he would really be a little powerless. However, now that he had Ling Han's help to control the temperature of the flames, he could free up a part of his energy to calm the medicinal properties that had gone out of control. The old man and the young man were both completely focused, while the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden waited quietly on the sidelines. As long as they saw Ling Han's undistracted appearance, they would not feel the slightest bit of impatience. They were busy for almost half a day's time. Pa pa pa. The old man struck 72 palms in a row, and the pill furnace suddenly buzzed and trembled. The flames in the furnace were instantly extinguished. Ha ha ha. The old man laughed loudly, his beard trembling. 3 billion years. 3 billion years. I have finally concocted the Wind and Fire 9 Clouds pill. Old geezer Situ, I have finally surpassed you this time. What else do you have to say? Just obediently lower your head in front of me. He laughed for a while, and then turned to Ling Han. He couldn't help but wear a strange expression. Who are you? Ling Han was amused and said, You don't know who I am, and you still dare to ask for my help? The old man instantly gaped, and showed an expression of shock. I thought that you were a helper that little girl had sent over. Could it be that you are not? What little girl? Ling Han shook his head. No. The old man scratched his head, yet laughed loudly. It's all my fault. I have finally concocted the Wind and Fire 9 Clouds pill. Brat, you don't know how difficult it is to concoct this pill. Let me tell you about it. It had troubled him for 3 billion years, and now that he had finally succeeded, the old man was naturally extremely excited. He pulled on Ling Han's hand, and regardless of whether he was interested or not, he began to babble on and on. As it turned out, this was an ancient pill recipe. Because it had been too long, it was not very complete. After he had obtained it, he had continuously tried all kinds of methods to repair it. As early as 500 million years ago, he had already determined this present pill recipe, but before this, he had been unable to succeed no matter what he tried. His name was Xiang Yan, and there was another person who had repaired this ancient pill recipe with him. His name was Situtang. The two of them had originally been good friends, but because they had a disagreement on the repair of the ancient pill recipe, they had quarreled a few times, and then started to fight. They each did their own thing, and both hoped that they could succeed. Then, they would go show off in front of the other, and enjoy the joy of the other lowering his head and admitting defeat in front of him. It had to be said that this was very childish, but if it were not for this kind of strange person, how could he have spent hundreds of millions, or even billions of years on alchemy? Xiang Yin was very excited, and actually told Ling Han the repair pill recipe from beginning to end. This kind of alchemical pill was used to heal injuries, and was extremely effective even for Immortal Palace tier elites. Thus, now that this pill recipe had been successfully repaired, its significance could be said to be incredibly great. He would even be recorded in the annals of history, and be revered as a god by countless alchemists of later generations. Just like that, Ling Han had perfectly learned a new pill recipe, and it was also the first celestial level pill recipe, so it was incredibly precious. Seeing that Xiang Yan was still talking excitedly without end, as if he could completely boast for a lifetime, Ling Han hurriedly called for a stop, and pulled the two women with him, as if he was fleeing. Though Xiang Yin chased after them for a few steps, he immediately ran back happily. Now, this pill furnace was his treasure, and he was afraid that if he ran away, the alchemical pill would be stolen by someone else. Ling Han and his group left the courtyard, and turned towards that palace. At this time, the banquet had already begun, and they could hear the sound of stringed instruments. The strange thing was that the banquet was actually not being held in the palace. In fact, This could not even be called a traditional banquet, because there were no tables, and there were people sitting around them. Instead, there were at least 100 tables that formed a long line, and the tables were filled with food. The guests were holding plates, and they could take whatever they wanted to eat. There were plates at the side of every table, and from time to time, there would also be attendants taking the empty plates and adding food to them. This was quite interesting. All of them were holding plates in their hands, and some were eating as they walked, while others were gathered in groups of 2s and 3s, chatting as they ate. At the side, there were musicians fiddling with musical instruments, and there were also beautiful women dancing. Ling Han said, "You guys find a place to wait, I'll go and get some food." Cell phones read more refreshingly. Chapter 1748. Ling Han turned around and saw that it was a young man dressed in black. He smiled and asked, "Oh, then how should I woo him? In any case, you definitely can't do it like this. What beauty would want a glutton?" The young man in black scoffed. Ling Han's playfulness flared, and he asked, "Friend, how should I address you?" "Huayuan City Cooing," the young man in black said. Ling Han nodded and said, "Pants, how about we make a bet?" "Pants, pants." Ku Ying's expression darkened. "Your ability to come up with nicknames is too lousy. Furthermore, since it's so lousy, why do you still say it?" He was instantly displeased and asked, "What bet?" "I want to use these foods to woo those 2 girls, and you can call me Big Brother in the future," Ling Han said with a smile. Ku Ying humphed and said, "Sure, but if you can't, then I won't call you Pants, I'll call you Underpants," Ling Han followed up. "Fuck you." Ku Ying didn't know what was going on, but he was provoked by Ling Han in a few moves. He said darkly, "If you can't, call me Grandpa Ku in the future." Some people beside them heard their bet and couldn't help but get excited, saying, "Then I'll bet too." Young people were all fun, and this bet was obviously a sure win. These 2 women, especially that veiled woman, had a perfect figure and a noble bearing that made others not dare to approach them. Could they possibly be gluttons? Even if they were, the food here could be taken by anyone. And if you could woo a girl like this, would there still be any justice in the world? Unfortunately, no one noticed that Ling Han and the 2 women had actually come in together. If they saw this scene, there definitely wouldn't be anyone who dared to make such a bet. "Hey, let's be clear first, it's those 2 women," someone immediately added. One of the 2 women was in the Genesis tier, and a severing mundane tier only had to crook his finger, and the possibility of them throwing themselves into his arms was too high. There was no lack of powerful women in this world that wanted to climb up the social ladder. "That's right, it's either that veiled woman, or woo both of them," everyone said. Ling Han purposely frowned and said, "Can you not make it so difficult? I'm still a newbie." Of course, everyone was in high spirits. This banquet was all about eating and drinking. It was so boring. "All right then." Ling Han nodded reluctantly. He pushed aside the man in front of him, who was still trying to curry favor with them, and said, "2 beauties, do you want to eat immortal beast meat?" "Of course I do," the 2 girls said with a smile. "Fuck, what's going on? Are these 2 beauties foodies?" Why did their expressions change when they heard about food? Just now, no matter who tried to strike up a conversation with them, they were always cold. If they weren't foodies, how could they have changed so much and so quickly? "I want to eat it, but I have a condition," Ling Han said slowly. "What are the conditions?" The 2 girls naturally cooperated. "You need a kiss." "All right." The 2 girls moved closer, and each of them planted a kiss on one side of Ling Han's face. The people at the side were all dumbfounded, so it was so easy to pick up girls. Ling Han opened the clay pot. This was celestial soup, and would be of great help to their current cultivation level. He took out bowls, and filled a bowl for each of the 2 girls. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden could only drink some soup. She hadn't advanced into the severing mundane tier, and if she directly ate meat and celestial medicine, it was more likely that her body would explode and die. The Empress indeed needed nourishment. Previously, when she advanced into the severing mundane tier, she had lost a few doppelgangers. Though she could form them again, the consumption was great. This pot of soup was really timely. At first, Ling Han wouldn't be so extreme, but his wife was the most important, so he naturally couldn't be polite. Ling Han turned around, smiled at everyone, and said, "Call me Big Brother." Big Brother. Everyone was convinced, and then immediately turned and ran. They also wanted to get some celestial soup and come back to woo these two beauties. Ling Han laughed loudly, and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden shook her head. This husband was like a child sometimes, really making one speechless. Meanwhile, the empress didn't care at all. As long as Ling Han liked it, she would support him. However, because the celestial soup had been wiped out by Ling Han, many people expressed their protest to Fu Xiaoyan. In the end, Fu Xiaoyan had no choice but to order someone to make another pot. After all, this was to attract people. If the horse didn't eat its fill, how could it be expected that the horse would run fast? But when the second pot of celestial soup was served, all of them showed vicious expressions and immediately began to fight. They had all been tricked by Ling Han, thinking that they could woo an exquisite beauty like the empress with a pot of celestial soup. For the sake of the empress, they naturally fought with all their might. These were all young people and very hot-blooded. In a short while they fought for real. Pung pung pung. Instantly there was chaos. "Wife, it's mine." Ling Han first pulled the two women to one side, and then covered his face and charged into the battle. In a short while he came out, holding a clay pot in his hand. If it wasn't celestial soup, what else could it be? He and the empress began to eat happily, while the heavenly phoenix divine maiden couldn't eat anymore. In the first place, she was already at the peak stage of the Genesis tier, and if she couldn't sever her mundane, she could only endlessly increase the number of stars. The battle lasted for a long time, and it was Bei Xianming who personally moved, and only then did everyone subdue. A second Severance King tier was naturally awesome. His expression was dark, and he shouted at the others. They actually dared to fight in a large group at the Fu clan's banquet? Were they tired of living? "Where's the soup?" Someone suddenly cried out when he discovered that the celestial soup had disappeared. When everyone saw this, they all wailed in grief. Wasn't it all for that pot of celestial soup? Now it had actually disappeared without a trace. How could they feel like their parents had died? Ling Han drank the soup cheerfully, not feeling the slightest bit guilty. "Husband, it seems like everywhere you go, there isn't a place that is safe. It's definitely a chaotic place," the heavenly phoenix divine maiden commented. Ling Han thought for a moment, and this was indeed the case. The mystery realms that he entered basically didn't have any proper ones. He even discovered the corpse of a celestial king in the severing mundane pool, obtained the source water of heaven and earth, and a core secret technique of a celestial king. And when he entered the celestial realm and went to Dark Moon City, the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan was destroyed, and when he went to Black Moon City, the Shao clan was hopping mad. Strange, he had never thought of stirring up trouble, but it just so happened that trouble would come crashing down on him. And with his personality, he was also someone who wasn't willing to suffer losses. So small matters would slowly become big matters. On the other side, Bei Xianming sternly rebuked a few more times, and Fu Xiaoyan stepped forward saying, "Next there will be a small test, and those who successfully pass will be able to join the Fu clan. And our Fu clan also has an agreement with the Return to Origin Palace, and we can recommend good seedlings to join this 4-star force." She paused, and as expected, everyone's eyes lit up. Only then did she say, "I hope that everyone can seize this opportunity." Everyone was excited, to say nothing of the Return to Origin Palace. Just being able to join the Fu clan was already a supreme honor. For a mere first severance, a 3-star force was like the bright moon in the sky, and was completely out of reach. "May I ask Fairy Fu, what is this test like?" Recommending the new book by the old urban author Peace City Supreme Grade Celestial Doctor. An invincible celestial emperor reincarnated, and possessed a student of Wuxia Medical College. His skills were extraordinary, and his medical skills were astonishing. He traveled unhindered through Wuxia City, and had boundless luck with women. Chapter 1749. Later, we will go to a mountain forest, and what everyone has to do is actually very simple. Within 10 days, You just have to cross the mountain and walk to the other end, Fu Shaoran said. Hearing her say it so casually, everyone revealed a solemn expression. If the Fu clan was so easy to enter, could it still be considered a 3-star force? But Fu Shaoyan was only willing to say so much now, and they couldn't press her either, so they could only keep their doubts in their hearts. In any case, they would know when they reached the place. Everyone left the area of the palace, heading all the way north. The power of regulations of a small world was too weak, and the spatial barrier seemed to be non-existent. They only took a few steps and crossed thousands of mountains and rivers. There was a mountain ahead, 30,000 meters tall and several tens of thousands of meters long. But wasn't such a tall mountain a matter of a single step for a first Severance elite? Everyone, please take this piece of paper. When you reach the top of the mountain later, you need to stamp a seal on the paper to a person there, Fu Shaoran said. If the person arrives but doesn't have a seal, then it won't be considered a pass. Everyone looked at each other. Could it be that the difficulty lay in stamping this seal? Fu Shaoyan continued. Everyone, martial art is cruel, so please measure it first, lest you lose your life here. Hearing this, everyone's expression finally changed. This small test could actually cost their lives? If you don't want to take the risk, you don't have to participate in the test. But if you ascend the mountain, you are responsible for your own life and death, Fu Shaoyan said calmly. If there are no questions, then let's begin. With just a slight hesitation, a great many people had already charged out. Wasn't the life of a cultivator to fight against heaven and earth, and against others? If they took this gamble, they would have a chance to enter the Fu clan, and their future would be bright. Otherwise, if they stayed in a 1-star force, so what if they lived for hundreds of billions of years? In the end, they wouldn't be able to survive the immortals' tribulation, and would be killed sooner or later. Everyone rushed out, and the companions that the severing mundane tier elites brought stayed behind. Ling Han drew the heavenly phoenix divine maiden into the Black Tower, and then slowly ascended the mountain with the Empress. Fu Shaoran said that they only had to stamp a seal, and then go to the other side of the mountain. There was no rule that they had to get in the top few places, so the two of them naturally didn't have to hurry. After taking a few steps, they couldn't help but be slightly surprised because their speed was severely suppressed. Logically speaking, this was refined from a small world, so the power of regulations was too weak. It was completely impossible for it to bind a severing mundane tier. However, on this mountain, it was completely different, to the extent where it was even more powerful than immortal domain's natural laws, making their speeds drop to a level where they were at most 100 times faster than ordinary people. To a first Severance elite, this was ridiculously slow. What a strong gravitational force. Moreover, the air is also very viscous, as if it's filled with something. It's like a swamp, further limiting the speed. Ling Han analyzed. However, he thought that if he used lightning flash, he could still burst out with high speed. The Empress nodded, but she was completely unafraid. The Fu family had set up such a test to obtain talents, not to kill them. Thus, this test was definitely something that could only be passed by those with a flawless severance. However, both Ling Han and the Empress had attained Tao through a flawless severance of heaven and earth, and their strength could even suppress second severance elites. Thus, passing this test would not be a simple matter. As the two of them walked, they discussed martial art as well. Ling Han taught the secret technique of the myriad beasts Celestial King to the Empress. He was very much looking forward to it. If each of the Empress doppelgangers could also form 10 battle beasts, then when the Empress battled with others in future, she would be able to summon 9 doppelgangers and 100 battle beasts. This lineup was a little frightening. Both of them were geniuses of martial art. Those Celestial King techniques were incredibly difficult to grasp and understand. As they discussed them, they still managed to find some clues amidst the chaos, and had a little clue. They both had grasped some, but compared to a true Celestial King technique, it was only the tip of the iceberg. Halt! They were just speaking when they saw a person suddenly appear in front of them. He was dressed in martial attire, and looked like a guard, holding a saber in his hand. If you want to advance further, you will have to receive a saber strike from me, Ling Han asked. And if I can't receive it, then you can only resign yourself to fate. This man in martial attire paused, and then added, I will try my best to be merciful, and not harm your lives. Oh, no wonder Fu Shaoran had to advise him. So this was what the test was like. Ling Han cracked a smile and asked, Can I attack first? That man faltered, then laughed loudly, and said, You are the 7th person to ask me this question. Not bad, not bad, your brain is very active. You can attack first. But if you do, then when I make my move, your defenses will be greatly reduced, and the possibility that you can receive this saber strike from me will be even smaller. You're a second severance, right? Ling Han suddenly asked. That man was not surprised and said, That's right, I'm a second severance. However, you do not have to worry. I will not use my full power, and will limit it to the level of a first severance. As long as you are an ordinary severing Dao, you will at least be able to retreat unscathed under this saber strike of mine. Ling Han smiled and said, I am not worried, but you had best be worried. Worried about what? That man asked strangely. The Empress suddenly moved, and delivered a palm strike at that man. Boom! The sun, moon, and stars appeared in her palm, and multiple great Dao appeared. The power of regulation rippled, and it was as if a supreme Empress had descended. That man paled in shock, and instinctively wanted to wield his saber to parry the attack, but immediately showed an expression of hesitation. He was afraid that if he met her attack head-on he would die. This strike was too frightening. After a mere instant of hesitation, he gave up on the idea of attacking. He held his saber horizontally in front of his chest, and activated his full power. He was going to block this attack first, and then take advantage of the opportunity to counterattack. Pung, the Empress's palm strike pressed down on the saber, and a clear handprint actually appeared on the saber. An irresistible force crushed over, and that man stumbled back in retreat. His face turned pale, and then became completely red. With a pu, he began to spit out a mouthful of blood. Worry about this. Ling Han finally finished speaking. Though that man was a second severance, he was only a minor guard of the Fu clan, so how could he possibly be a king tier? And the Empress's battle prowess could be called a king tier, even among second severance, and only the likes of Bei Xianming could be a match for her. This man was far inferior. Defeated in a single move, that man looked at the Empress with disbelief in his eyes. Who would believe that a first severance could actually defeat a second severance so easily? If it were not for the fact that he was personally involved, and someone else told him about it, he would have treated it as a completely unfunny joke. Ling Han grinned and said, It's my turn, right? That man stood up with difficulty. Though his chest was already a mess, he forced himself to endure it. He believed that with his cultivation level of second severance, even if he was heavily wounded, it would be enough to complete the test of a first severance. My husband is stronger than me, the Empress suddenly said. These words were spoken extremely calmly, and there was no intention of showing off. She was merely stating a very ordinary fact. That man trembled in fright, and with a ding, the saber in his hand fell to the ground. He did not want to die young. Chapter 1750. Ling Han and the Empress easily passed the first test, and behind them, that saber man's legs were still shaking. How could there be such a freakish couple? He was a second severance, and a second severance grand elder was actually scared to the point of dropping his saber by two first severance latecomers. It could be imagined how frightening this couple was. It was best to never see them again. Ling Han and the Empress continued to discuss the myriad beast celestial king's 10 beasts technique. Ling Han did not obtain the complete celestial technique, but the core secrets were not missing. And what could be taken seriously by them was only the core parts that formed the 10 battle beasts. Which of them did not cultivate a celestial king technique? The two of them drank reincarnation tea as they discussed. When they were in the mood, they would even spar a little, not caring whether they walked quickly or slowly. However, after half a day, they finally arrived at the second test point. There was a large group of people gathered there, but they were actually not fighting, but playing chess. Go! Ling Han merely swept a glance over, and discovered that this was no ordinary game of Go. It was as if the black and white pieces had a life of their own, and they were all exuding a boundless killing intent. As they placed their pieces and ate their pieces, killing intent overflowed. Those with weak willpower might even collapse. On one side was a young man, who should be a first severance genius that had stood out this time, and on the other side was an old man dressed in a long gray robe, his face full of wrinkles, and his hair all white. But this old man was a second severance. Ling Han was slightly surprised. He had initially thought that this spatial god tool was only a temporary residence of Fu Xiaoyan, but now it seemed that it was not the case. If it was only a temporary residence, how could there possibly be a celestial-grade alchemist, and at least 2 second severance elites? Probably, this was specially for Fu Xiaoyan to recruit people like them, so she would bring it with her. Otherwise, such a spatial god tool would definitely be placed in the Fu clan under normal circumstances. To say nothing else, merely the wind and fire 9 clouds pill that Xiang Yan had refined was enough to make Immortal Palace tier-grade elites fight over it. Pooh! At this moment, the young man suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, his expression looking very haggard. But he asked the old man, "How long did I last?" "Half the time it takes for an incense stick to burn," the gray-robed old man lightly said. He shook his head. "Unfortunately, I cannot pass." Ling Han asked around, and found out that he had to play against this old man. If he could last for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, he would pass the test. But if he couldn't do it, he could only return the way he came. "Who wants to come?" The gray-robed elder swept his gaze across the crowd, and some people immediately shook their heads. There was no rule that stated that they had to come from here. It didn't matter which way they came up the mountain. As long as they were stamped, they could go to the other side of the mountain. The old man in the robe didn't stop him. He just sneered. These people naturally would not know that if they fought their way through the stages, then even if they failed, there would not be any danger to their lives. But if they left the righteous path, that would be an incredibly dangerous thing. Putting aside the first severance, even second severance, third severance, or fourth severance could possibly be killed. He wasn't going to say anything. He just watched coldly from the sidelines. More and more people left. There were already quite a few people who played chess with the elder, but none of them could last for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. They spat out blood, and were seriously injured. Ling Han sat down and said, "Uncle, I'll play with you." With a wave of his sleeve, the gray-robed elder collected all the chess pieces on the chessboard into the chess box at the side. He said, "You take the black chess piece and go first." Ling Han didn't stand on ceremony, and casually took a black chess piece and placed it. The elder naturally could only use a white chess piece, and similarly placed it quickly. After a few times, Ling Han's placement was still very fast, but the elder was becoming slower and slower. This wasn't a normal game of chess. Instead, with the chessboard as the battlefield, and the chess pieces as the soldiers, they were carrying out a different kind of battle. What they were competing with was the spirit, which was the grasp of regulations. First severance naturally couldn't compare with second severance, and that was why the elder had a time limit of 30 minutes. If he could last that long, he would have passed. But Ling Han wasn't an ordinary first severance. In terms of grasp of regulations, he possessed the 9 heavens flame and Xiaonin source water, these 2 great killing tools. This was something that a second severance could stand against. With the chess pieces as the medium, the 9 heavens flame and Xiaonin source water launched a frightening attack towards the gray-robed elder. How could this be blocked? The elder naturally could only retreat step by step. His placement of chess pieces was completely out of order, and very soon, they were eaten up by Ling Han's chess pieces in large swaths. Not even 30 minutes had passed, and the elder could only give up his chess piece and admit defeat. He looked at Ling Han in shock. Who the fuck you was testing who? As an examiner, he actually lost to an examinee, and it was a crushing defeat at that. He dared not believe it. "You have passed," the elder said tragically. He was very proud of his own chess skills, and that was why he had thought of such a move to test others. He had never thought that he would actually suffer such a huge setback in this aspect. Ling Han held the Empress's hand as they walked. At first, the elder wanted to stop them. This was against the rules, But when he recalled that he had been defeated by Ling Han, how could he have the nerve to speak up? He had just raised his hand, but then put it down again. The others were not convinced, and protested one after another. If you can win against me, you can also bring others over. You can even bring as many as you want, the gray-robed elder said, and immediately shut everyone's mouths. Ling Han and the Empress continued to slowly ascend the mountain. After another half a day, they were already very close to the peak, and the third stage appeared in front of them. It was still surrounded by a large group of people. Only when they neared did they realize that this third stage was not a test of battle prowess, nor was it a test of one's grasp of regulations. Instead, they were given a piece of paper, and written on it was an incomplete cultivation technique. They were asked to complete it as much as possible. This was very difficult. The majority of cultivators, including many young king tiers, had high comprehension ability and strong battle prowess, but from the beginning to the end, they were all walking in the footsteps of others. Thus, it was extremely difficult to give them an incomplete cultivation technique and ask them to complete it. When Ling Han arrived, Ma Yin and Song Ji were trapped here. The two of them racked their brains, but did not dare to easily return the paper in their hands. They only had one chance, and if they made a huge mistake, they would lose the chance to continue forward. Of course, they could also take a detour, but that would be extremely dangerous. If they could still reach the peak like this, then based on this battle prowess and luck, the Fu clan was also willing to accept them. Ling Han and the Empress walked over, and each received a piece of paper. There was a cultivation technique written on it, and there were a few key points that were left blank. They needed to be filled in. There was also a second Severance elite overseeing this place, and it was more than enough to suppress first Severance cultivators like them. Brat! There was an angry roar, and an elder leaped over, his eyes filled with killing intent as he looked at Ling Han. This was the first Severance Grand Elder of the Qi clan, and he had naturally advanced into the second Severance now. Previously, in the Severing Mundane Pool, they had wanted to forcefully seize Ling Han's wooden raft, and in the end, two of them had been killed by Ling Han. In the Severing Mundane Pool, the third junior of the Qi clan had also transformed into Dao because of his failure. Only he had managed to deliver the second Severance, and advanced into the second Severance. This banquet was originally targeted at first Severance, but it had not been clearly stated before. Anyone who had successfully severed the mundane in the Severing Mundane Pool could come here. So the elder of the Qi clan had made use of this loophole. He was a second Severance, so the first two stages were naturally easy to pass, but the third stage had nothing to do with strength, and it had stumped him. Now that it was Ling Han, his eyes instantly turned red, and his killing intent blazed. Chapter 1752. The white-robed young man hurriedly pulled back the tune. Otherwise, if others knew that he Fu Gaoyan had actually played a falling lotus flower, how would he still have the face to see others in future? But even though Ling Han's playing was not organized, it had an extremely powerful ability to influence, causing Fu Gaoyan's tune to not return to its old path no matter what. Wung 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 dang dang. At first, the sound of the qin could still struggle a few more times, but it very soon gave in, and followed Ling Han's tune, playing a falling lotus flower. Pung! Fu Gaoyan smashed the qin in a fit of anger. He could not control his hands at all. If he continued to play, he would go mad. Ling Han laughed and asked, "How should we settle now?" He did not know instrumental music, but how powerful was the power of his spirit, and a contest of instrumental music was actually a contest of spirit. The stronger one would be able to drive the other, and it was clear that Fu Gaoyan was no match for him, though the latter was already a second Severance elite. Fu Gaoyan gritted his teeth and said, "Whatever, I'm going to give you a beating first." He really could not take it anymore. He, the most outstanding prodigy of the Fu clan, actually played half a falling lotus flower. In future, he really would have no face to see others. He proudly declared, "If you can block 3 moves from me, then you're impressive." Boom! A finger shot out, but it caused the winds and clouds to change. That was clearly only a finger, yet it was entwined with multiple flashes of golden light, as if it had turned into the world's finest celestial tool, pressing down towards Ling Han. Ling Han similarly shot out a finger and smilingly asked, "What's so difficult about that?" Wang, an indescribable chill spread out. Even if he was a second severance, so what? He would be frozen to death. Ka ka ka. The golden finger that Fu Gaoyan shot out was immediately sealed in ice, and then shattered with a loud bang under the impact of Ling Han's violent power. Yet the force of Ling Han's finger was practically not weakened in the slightest, and continued to shoot out towards Fu Gaoyan. Fu Gaoyan showed an expression of shock. He was a second severance. This brat was really not simple. Fu Gaoyan let out a long howl, unleashing his full power. With a wave of his hands, 2 longswords appeared in his hands, and he slashed out at Ling Han. Ling Han was unarmed. His present physique was comparable to 2-star pseudo-divine metal, and even a third severance would find it very difficult to wound him. It was enough to withstand a second severance and a pseudo-celestial tool. The sword in Fu Gaoyan's hand was indeed a pseudo-celestial tool, and it was a 2-star one at that. It was sharp, sturdy, and incredibly powerful. With a slash, even an ordinary second severance elite would not be able to escape the fate of being sliced in half. However, this was not enough to suppress Ling Han. The two of them fought fiercely, and it was difficult to determine the victor for a moment. Fu Gaoyan was stunned. He had formed 10 million stars in the Eternal River tier, and had advanced into the Severing Mundane tier on this basis. Furthermore, it was a flawless severance. He should be invincible in this cultivation level. But a guy who had just advanced into the first severance was actually able to match him in all aspects? Hiss. Then if this guy reached the peak stage of the first severance, wouldn't he be able to easily suppress him? Fu Gaoyan was presently in the late stage of the second severance. And if he took another step to reach the peak stage of the second severance, how could the leap that Ling Han had made from the early stage of the first severance to the peak stage? What kind of freak was this? You're a Severing Mundane tier in the Severing Heaven and Earth tier. He immediately came to a realization. Otherwise, there definitely would not be a guy with such freakish battle prowess in this world. Ling Han chuckled and said, "I've passed in 3 moves, right?" Fu Gaoyan stopped and said, No more. You are practically a freak. I have no confidence in winning at all." Although he said that he had no confidence in winning, he was still considerably confident. Because even if he could not win, that did not mean that he could not kill him. There were some secret techniques that would damage oneself greatly when used, yet still had the effect of killing the enemy with a single strike. This was only a test, so he naturally would not use this kind of killing move. Furthermore, there were actually only 3 stages. He had only come here to show off a little because he was bored. Come, let's go have a drink." Fu Gaoyan walked over and placed his arm around Ling Han's shoulder, appearing to be very intimate. This made the Empress very displeased, and she immediately sent out a palm strike. Fu Gaoyan exclaimed in surprise, and exchanged blows with the Empress at close range. The two of them pushed out palms, exchanged palms, and did not move their bodies. In that short few breaths, they had already exchanged a few thousand blows. The Empress was at a slight disadvantage, but it was not as if she could not put up a fight. Fuck! Fu Gaoyan's eyes were practically popping out. The Empress had definitely also advanced to the Severing Mundane tier, from striking the heaven and earth. Otherwise, how could a first severance battle a second severance? Furthermore, if it was not for the fact that she was only in the early stage of the first severance, if she had reached the late stage of the first severance, which meant that she was only 1 minor level away from him, then her battle prowess would definitely not be weaker than his. He was about to cry. Just think about it, Fu Gaoyan was a rare prodigy of the Fu clan. Though he was not famous, that was because the Fu clan had the objective of protecting him. Fu Gaoyan was considerably conceited. Aside from not advancing to the Severing Mundane tier from striking the heaven and earth, his path of cultivation could be said to be perfect. But now, he had suffered a great blow. 2 freaks that had advanced to the Severing Mundane tier had appeared consecutively. In front of these 2 people, did he still have the face to call himself a prodigy? "My name is Fu Gaoyan. Brother, how do I address you?" Fu Gaoyun appeared very casual, and did not have the slightest air of a descendant of a noble clan. Ling Han, this is my wife Luan Xing, Ling Han introduced. Fu Gaoyun nodded, but did not put his arm around Ling Han's shoulder again and said, Brother Ling, come. I am convinced of your battle prowess, but I definitely have to correct your poor taste in music. He was still brooding over this. How could this guy trample on music like this? Everyone had their hobbies, and Fu Gaoyun's hobby was to play the zither and the flute. He claimed to be proficient in both the zither and the flute. What he could not stand the most was an idiot in the field of music. Thus, when he decided to befriend Ling Han, he had also made up his mind to raise the level of Ling Han's musical skills. Ling Han chuckled. Aside from practicing martial arts, he was also fond of concocting alchemical pills. He had no interest in playing the zither, or making music at all. Whoever led the other astray. As long as Fu Gaoyun did not seduce Ling Han, the Empress would not make a move either. The three of them descended the mountain, and Ling Han released the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. It was inevitable that he had to introduce her to Fu Gaoyun. On the surface, Fu Gaoyun addressed Ling Han as brother, but addressed the heavenly phoenix divine maiden as sister-in-law. His intention of acting as the boss was already completely exposed. Brother, why have you come down with them? Fu Wanyan had already arrived at the other side of the mountain to welcome those who had successfully passed. When she saw Fu Gaoyun walking alongside Ling Han and the others, she couldn't help but look surprised. In her impression, this brother of hers was arrogant, and no one could enter his eyes. But now he was actually talking and laughing with Ling Han. This was too exaggerated. Fu Gaoyun smiled and said, This is my good brother, so I naturally have to accompany him. Good brother? How long had they known each other? And they were already good brothers. Bei Xianming watched from the side, and couldn't help but show an expression of jealousy. That was because in order to win the favor of this future brother-in-law of his, he had once deliberately tried to curry favor with him, but the latter completely ignored him. It's fine if you're proud, but you're actually talking and laughing with this lowly commoner? Aren't you deliberately slapping my face? Ling Han, I want to battle with you again. Just at this moment, Xiaosheng called out loudly. Chapter 1753. Here only two people had temporarily passed, Xiaosheng and Changsun Liang. Changsun Liang only nodded at Ling Han, and did not step forward to greet him. There was no rush. Xiaosheng's eyes were spitting fire. Previously, he had been beaten like a sandbag by Ling Han and the Empress, and kicked around like a ball. This was the greatest humiliation in his life. Before breaking through, he felt that he could not possibly be a match for Ling Han and the Empress. But after advancing into the severing mundane tier, it was different. This was a reshuffling of strength. He had a flawless severance. So even if Ling Han was similarly a flawless severance, his battle prowess could not possibly be much higher than his. Then his battle experience, secret techniques, and so on could be of great use. He wanted to take revenge. What are you? Fu Gaoyun suddenly asked. Without any warning, he moved, and shot out a punch at Xiaosheng. Though Xiaosheng had been caught by surprise, as a first severance elite, and a king tier of the present age, his reaction naturally would not be slow. He immediately shot out, leaping back rapidly. But a second severance against a first severance was a crushing suppression. This was something that had never been missed since ancient times. Aside from encountering freakish geniuses like Ling Han and the Empress, how could Xiaosheng possibly dodge completely? The power that Fu Gaoyun had shot out condensed into a fist, and blasted onto Xiaosheng's body. This was still because the latter had dodged in time, and was not struck directly by the fist. Instead, he was brushed aside by the side. Even so, Xiaosheng was still sent flying, and he began to spurt out blood wildly in midair. Fu Xiaoyan and the others were all confused. Why had Fu Gaoyun suddenly moved? Xiaosheng landed, and only managed to steady himself after staggering a few steps. He gritted his teeth and asked, I wonder why young Master Fu has moved against me? Didn't you want to exchange blows with Brother Ling? Fu Gaoyun asked disdainfully. Then it's the same if you exchange blows with me. Xiaosheng's eyes were spitting fire and anger, and he was incredibly jealous inside. Ling Han had become good friends with the young master of the Fu clan just like that. He had clearly challenged Ling Han, but Fu Gaoyan had immediately accepted. What kind of friendship was this? Fu Xiaoyan and the others only thought so, and were similarly incredibly curious, especially Fu Xiaoyan. She was deeply aware of how conceited this elder brother of hers was. It was really difficult to become his good friend. Hee. Fu Gaoyan shook his head. Do you all think that I only made a move because I call him Brother Ling? That's right. If anyone wants to challenge my brother, I will naturally accept it. However, even if I don't make a move, how could such trash be a match for my brother Ling? He paused for a moment and looked at everyone's faces before saying, just now, Brother Ling fought me to a draw. What? Fu Xiaoyan, Bei Xianming, Xiao Sheng, and even Chang Sun Liang all showed expressions of disbelief. You are really too good at bullshitting. It should be known that you are a second severance. King tiers like them were already awesome enough, but they could only be invincible among their peers. Even if they cultivated to the peak stage of the first severance, they would only be able to fight to a draw when encountering someone in the early stage of the second severance. There was nothing that could be done about it. With every additional severance, their battle prowess would rise to a whole new level. And not only was Fu Gaoyan a second severance, his cultivation level was in the late stage of the second severance, and he was also a king tier among second severance elites. Theoretically speaking, even a king tier at the peak stage of the second severance could just barely suppress him. But now, a guy who had just advanced into the first severance was actually able to fight to a draw with Fu Gaoyan. Wasn't this a great joke? I don't believe it. Xiaoxing immediately called out, slightly dazed. If these words were true, this meant that he could not possibly take revenge in the severing mundane tier at least. He could only hope that after advancing into the dividing soul tier, there would be another reshuffling of strength. But putting aside whether they could reach such heights, even if they could, that would be something that would only happen after many years. Even if he had the aptitude of a king tier, he would need at least 10 billion years. Fu Gaoyan only scoffed, not even bothering to refute it. Did he need this kind of trash as acknowledgement? I don't believe it either, Bei Xianming said darkly. If Ling Han could fight to a draw with Fu Gaoyan, then wouldn't that mean that the latter's strength was still above his own? He could not accept this. If he silently acknowledged this, he would not be able to raise his head in front of Ling Han. So what if you don't believe it? Fu Gaoyan said disdainfully. Though the strength of the Fu clan was indeed inferior to the lunar sect, they were both 3-star forces, so there was no need for them to be afraid of the other. Moreover, the two forces were separated by who knew how far, and there were at least 10 3-star forces between them. Even if the lunar sect wanted to make a move, how could they pass through so many forces? They could only fight their way here. But if they fought their way here like that, when the enemy reached their gates, the lunar sect would not have many elites left, either. Bei Xianming naturally knew this too, so he was not angry. He merely smiled faintly and said, Ling Han, do you dare to battle with me? Ling Han laughed and said, I've long been waiting for you to say this. You know, I've long wanted to slap that stinky face of yours. Yeah, Brother Ling, you also feel that way? Fu Gaoyan immediately clapped his hands and laughed loudly. I also want to slap you, but due to my status, I can't do it, so I'll leave this task to you. A small matter. Ling Han nodded. You all. Bei Xianming gritted his teeth, his killing intent boiling. They actually dared to underestimate him like this. He was the holy son of the lunar sect, a fully deserving king tier. The might of a king tier was not to be underestimated. If you're not convinced, I'll beat you into submission. Ling Han took a step forward and shook his clothes, looking relaxed. Just because of that, Bei Xianming said menacingly. He did not finish his words, but the killing intent in his eyes was boiling like fire. Brother Gao, it's fine if I kill him, right? Ling Han turned to ask Fu Gaoyan. Fu Gaoyan immediately shuddered, his expression darkening slightly, and he said, Definitely not. Even he could not beat up Bei Xianming, because he was bullying the weak, and the lunar sect would definitely fly into a rage. And if their holy son died here, that would really be a serious matter. The lunar sect would have a good reason to move, and it was unlikely that the other forces would stop them on their way. Without these shields, with the strength of the lunar sect ranked in the top 3 among the 3 star forces, the Fu clan would really be in big trouble. Why not? Ling Han asked smilingly. With Brother Fu's courage, would you be afraid of a mere lunar sect? Fuck, you can't praise me to death like this. Fu Gaoyun's expression was filled with resentment. He discovered that Ling Han was not only an idiot when it came to instrumental music, but also had a kind of ability that could drive others mad. I'll call you brother, alright? You all have enough? Bei Xianming practically spat out word by word, his eyes practically spitting fire. Did he think he was air? You haven't made a move yet, so you're just talking to pass the time. Ling Han broke into a smile. Come, what are you standing around for? Hurry up and make your move. The sooner we start, the sooner we can wrap things up. Arrogant. Bei Xianming moved. Boom, he was filled with fury, and immediately used a powerful move. 2 cold glints shot out of his eyes, condensing into 2 ice swords that ruthlessly pierced towards Ling Han. Chapter 1754. Ling Han puffed out a breath of air, and blew it out. A ball of blazing flames danced, and the regulations of Great Tao actually turned into chains, clanking loudly. Ling Han couldn't help but smile in satisfaction. The might of the 9 heavens flame was becoming stronger and stronger. The ancestral flames of heaven and earth, the power of source power, were naturally awesome. Under the burning of the blazing flames, the 2 ice swords immediately melted, turning into water vapor. The regulations within them were also completely refined, leaving not the slightest bit behind. Bei Xianming's expression instantly became serious. At the beginning, he only felt boundless fury, thinking that Ling Han and Fu Gaoyun were deliberately toying with him. But whether there were elites or not, they would know once they made a move. Ling Han was very strong. Not only him, but Fu Xiaoyan, Xiao Sheng, and Changsun Liang were similarly incredibly shocked. Only the Empress, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and Fu Gaoyun looked as if this was only natural. Alternative severing mundane. Bei Xianming immediately guessed. Otherwise, how could he possibly surpass a minor level in battle? Hiss, this guy had reached a height that only the holy sons and holy daughters of true great sects could reach. Striking the heaven and earth. Bei Xianming's eyes turned red with jealousy. He too had once attempted to strike the heaven and earth to attain Tao, but after waving his saber once, he dared not continue. Otherwise, it would definitely be his life that would be severed. At first he had thought that this only existed in legends, and could not possibly be seen in 3-star forces, or even 4-star forces, but reality had given him a slap in the face. A guy that was merely a trash-like existence in his eyes had actually reached a height that he could only dream of. He dared not believe it, and was even more unwilling to believe it. Meanwhile, Fu Xiaoyan's pretty eyes lit up. Alternative severing mundane. And there really was someone that could achieve it. Alternative severing mundane. Xiao Sheng and Changsun Liang murmured. Limited by their level, they still did not know that one could achieve Tao by striking the heaven and earth. Sister, why don't you marry Brother Ling? Fu Gaoyun played the role of matchmaker. You, my brother Ling's natural talent, is who knows how many times higher than that despicable guy. In future, he will definitely be able to defeat various prodigies. If you miss out on such a good man, then you'll be crying in future. His voice was not soft at all, so Bei Xianming could hear him clearly. Bei Xianming's expression was so dark that it seemed as if water could drip out of it. You're trying to steal from me right in front of me? Is there anyone like this? He was truly enraged. He made a cut between his brows, and actually drew out a small silver sword that was only 3 inches long. This sword seemed to have been formed from ice and frost, and the moment it was drawn out, the temperature in the surroundings plummeted. Fu Gaoyun and the Empress were completely unaffected, yet the others were all shivering in fear. Fu Gaoyun and the Empress both released their auras, respectively protecting Fu Xiaoyan and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, but Xiao Sheng and Changsun Liang had no one to protect them, so they could only retreat far away. But they immediately showed expressions of shock, because they realized that the Empress could actually resist the might of that pseudo-celestial tool. She also advanced into the severing mundane tier by striking the heaven and earth, Fu Gaoyan explained to his younger sister. Fu Xiaoyan's small mouth immediately gaped into a circle, and Bei Xianming almost tripped and fell. There were actually as many as 2 such prodigies. Meanwhile, Changsun Liang and Xiaosheng were speechless. They still did not know the specific significance of striking the heaven and earth to advance. But one thing was certain, and that was that if one advanced into the severing mundane tier like this, their battle prowess would be astonishingly strong. For example, the reason why Ling Han was able to stand against Bei Xianming now was because he had advanced into the severing mundane tier by striking the heaven and earth. Bei Xianming put away all distracting thoughts and focused on the small sword in his hand. This was the Ice Cloud Sword, a 2-star pseudo-celestial tool. If its might could be completely unleashed, it could reach the 3rd severance, or even the 4th severance. Because he was the holy son of the lunar sect, he was worthy of possessing this kind of pseudo-celestial tool. With Bei Xuanming's present cultivation level, he was definitely unable to completely unleash the might of the Ice Cloud Sword, but it would not be difficult for him to reach the peak stage of the 2nd severance. Ling Han was indeed very strong, but you could match me in the early stage of the 2nd severance, so how could it be that you could even match the peak stage of the 2nd severance? He did not believe it. When the Ice Cloud Sword appears, the whole world will be sealed. Bei Xianming exclaimed softly. The short sword rose into the air, but rapidly enlarged, becoming a massive sword that was as long as 300 meters. The power of ice burst forth, and multiple patterns appeared, the veins glowing. Ling Han sighed. The divine demon sword still had not been able to advance to the level of a pseudo-celestial tool, and the broken wooden sword had been forever fixed at the level of a level 20 god tool. As a result, he now had no weapons to use. There was nothing that could be done. Who asked his physique to be so strong? And he actually did not have much need for weapons. He threw out a punch, and the power of regulation of the Xianin source water circulated, fighting cold with cold. Pung, the sword and fist collided, and a thick layer of ice condensed on the blade and fist at the same time, spreading towards the arms of the 2 of them. Ling Han was completely unafraid, and allowed the ice to condense, but Bei Xianming paled in shock. He hurriedly shook his arm, drawing back his sword and retreating. He repeatedly used his sword might. Pa pa pa. The ice on the blade shattered, and fell to the ground. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. But when he raised his head, he paled in shock because Ling Han had also easily shook his arm, and he was fine. He had a pseudo-celestial tool in his hand, and that was why he could be so powerful. You are merely a body of flesh and blood, so what right do you have to be so freakish? I'm going to beat you up. Ling Han charged over, and began a powerful attack. Bei Xianming used his mind to control the massive sword to parry, while his hands clenched into fists, using one celestial technique after another. The holy son of the lunar sect naturally had grasped a great many secret techniques, but no matter how he tossed and turned, it was completely ineffective against Ling Han. If he wanted to stand against Ling Han, he would have to reach Fu Gaoyan's height no matter what. Bei Xianming was much weaker in terms of cultivation level, so he naturally could only parry. With Ling Han's powerful suppression, Bei Xianming did not even have the ability to fight back. He could only passively defend, and was in an extremely sorry state. Xiaosheng, Changsun Liang, and Fu Xiaoyan were all dumbfounded. This kind of scene was completely unimaginable to them. Could a different kind of severing mundane tier be powerful to such an extent? Pung! Ling Han blasted through Bei Xuanming's defenses with a single punch, and began to violently pummel this guy. This guy had tried to kill him time and time again. Did he think that he did not know? If the 2 of them fought alone, Ling Han definitely would not be merciful. But if he killed Bei Xianming here, the Fu clan would also have to bear responsibility. Ling Han felt that Fu Gaoyan was not bad, so he decided to give him some face. Even so, Bei Xianming was very soon beaten into a pig's head. Sister, why don't you reconsider? Fu Gaoyan nudged his sister with his elbow. The corners of Fu Xiaoyan's lips twitched slightly. Bei Xianming was a king tier, at any rate, but in front of Ling Han, he practically did not have the ability to fight back. This was really a great shock to her, though she also knew that this was not because Bei Xianming was weak, but rather because Ling Han was too strong. No matter what, it was still a thorn in her heart, leaving behind such a pathetic scene for Bei Xianming. After Ling Han had his fill of beating, he finally withdrew his fist. Bei Xianming had actually not been severely wounded. He crawled to his feet, his face ashen. He really did not have the face to see anyone. Just at this moment a figure flew over. It was a white-haired elder. You're here, brat. It was precisely Xiang Yan, and he was staring at Ling Han with an excited expression. Chapter 1756. Xiang Yan was driven mad, while Fu Gaoyan was aggrieved. He recalled how he had repeatedly begged Xiang Yan to take him as a disciple, but the latter had been cold and indifferent. Now that Ling Han was cold and indifferent, Xiang Yan still did not give up. This comparison made him want to cry. I don't care. Your grasp of the great Tao of fire is so high, so it would really be a waste not to be an alchemist. Xiang Yan shook his head. He could not let go of such a natural genius of alchemy no matter what. Ling Han smiled and said, how about this? I'm going to the Fu clan anyway, so I'll ask for guidance from Senior when I'm not cultivating in the future. See this? You've obtained the favor of an alchemist, and you're actually bargaining, reluctant? If you're too pretentious, you'll be struck by lightning. However, Fu Gaoyan and Fu Xiaoyan were very happy, because Xiang Yan obviously valued Ling Han very much. Then if they could keep Ling Han in the Fu clan, the possibility of Xiang Yan leaving would be very small. Xiang Yan tried to persuade them a few more times, and could only reluctantly agree. He glanced at Bei Xianming, and the anger in his heart suddenly had a target to vent. He grabbed Bei Xianming over, and pung pung pung, a series of punches were thrown at him. Who asked this brat's words to be so unpleasant? Bei Xianming was incredibly depressed, but could only endure the beating. To say nothing of the fact that his own strength was far inferior to Xiang Yan's. Even if he was the same, or even stronger, he would not dare resist. This was a 3-star alchemist. He was so angry that he spat blood. Today was really the worst of his 8 lifetimes. First, he was beaten up by Ling Han, and then a 3-star alchemist. And if this matter was known by the sect master of the lunar sect, he would probably give him another beating. You actually dared to offend a 3-star alchemist. How much trouble did you want to bring to the lunar sect? After Xiang Yan vented his anger, he swaggered off. Then, he repeatedly reminded Ling Han that he definitely had to go to his place when he was free. Brother Ling, I'm convinced. Fu Gaoyan gave Ling Han a thumbs up. A severing mundane tear that dared to put on airs in front of a 3-star alchemist was probably only Ling Han. Bei Xianming, on the other hand, humphed and turned to leave. He really did not have the face to see anyone anymore. Awesome. Fu Gaoyan looked at Bei Xianming's back, and could not help but clap his hands. I hate this guy the moment I see him. Brother Ling, it's better for you to be my brother-in-law. In front of him, Bei Xianming suddenly staggered, and then his figure seemed to fly, instantly disappearing. Brother. Fu Xiaoyan blushed. Fu Gaoyan didn't think much of it and said, you and I are brothers. Not only is he a man of striking appearance, his talent in martial art is also astonishing, and he's even loved by Elder Yan. Where else can you find such a good man? Ling Han laughed and said, what a pity, what a pity. Such a good man is already taken. He hugged the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, indicating that he was already satisfied. TSK, isn't it normal for a man to have multiple wives and concubines? Fu Gaoyan still didn't give up. Ling Han's expression was strange. Including Hunyo and the others, he seemed to have 8 beauties. Even 3 and 4 concubines were not enough. Come, let's go drink. He changed the topic. Drink, drink. True enough, the moment they mentioned drinking, Fu Gaoyan forgot about this matter. He still had a difficult task, and that was to improve Ling Han's taste in music, or in short, his music quality. At present, there was nothing to criticize about Ling Han's character, but his music quality was really too poor. The 2 men went to drink, while Fu Xiaoyan accompanied the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Women naturally had their own topics to talk about. Ling Han and Fu Gaoyan only stopped drinking the next morning. Then, Fu Gaoyan discovered to his sorrow that the tune of Descending Lotus Flower had already been deeply rooted in his mind. The moment he touched the zither, he would naturally play it. It was over. Ling Han's music quality had not improved, and it was instead his music quality that had fallen. This time, the Fu clan had still recruited a considerable number of prodigies, and they were all young king tiers that had severed their Dao flawlessly. The so-called small test previously actually didn't have any decisive meaning. It was only to make these king tiers not be too arrogant, and to take them down a notch. This was indeed very effective. These king tiers all restrained their pride, knowing that prodigies like them still weren't qualified to put on airs in front of the Fu clan. Ling Han asked Fu Gaoyan to help him purchase a large amount of level 20 godly metal. He wanted to raise the divine demon sword to the level of divine metal. Even if it couldn't reach the level of divine metal, it could still reach the level of 1-star or 2-star pseudo-divine metal. The celestial realm definitely didn't lack level 20 godly metal. However, this required a large amount of star stones to purchase. Though Ling Han had earned a considerable amount, and also looted a considerable amount, if he wanted to raise the divine demon sword to the level of a celestial tool, this amount was only a drop in the bucket. Thus, he very quickly went to find Xiang Yan and asked him for guidance on how to concoct celestial pills. In future, he would be able to earn his own money. Xiang Yan was filled with anticipation for him and was only afraid that he wouldn't come. As long as Ling Han asked, he would answer without reservation. After Ling Han returned, he comprehended under the reincarnation tree. But even so, he still started to concoct the most basic celestial pill a month later. As expected, his cauldron exploded, but Xiang Yan was given a huge fright. "Brat, you are practically inhuman," the old man exclaimed in shock. "Though I have already overestimated you. Previously, I had thought that it would already be very good if you could start concocting celestial pills after 10,000 years, but you actually only used a month." Comprehending the medicinal theory of celestial medicines, and interweaving the regulations of the great Tao within them was an incredibly complicated matter. 10,000 years couldn't be considered long at all. But Ling Han had the reincarnation tree, and one day was equivalent to 100 years, so 1 month was equivalent to 3,000 years. In truth, the time he had spent was also very long, but Xiang Yan was completely unaware of it. Going by your rate of advancement, you will be able to concoct your first cauldron of celestial pills in 10 years at most. Xiang Yan was filled with envy. With regards to Ling Han's natural talent in alchemy, even he could only concede defeat. 10 years to be able to concoct his first cauldron of celestial pills? Ling Han shook his head and sighed. This was really difficult. But this kind of speed was already ridiculously fast. The majority of alchemists could be considered geniuses within 1 million years from the time they came into contact with celestial-level alchemical pills to the time they successfully concocted them. You shouldn't think that 100 million years was too long. Who asked that their lifespan would be unlimited after severing mundane tier, and they would have plenty of time to spend. The key was whether there were so many celestial medicines for you to squander. There was no helping it. He could only take things slowly. Ling Han also asked Fu Gaoyan to investigate the matters of the Rock Palace, while he left with the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Since he had advanced into the severing mundane tier, he had to return to Dark Moon City and properly settle the score with the Ding clan. At present, the only people he couldn't defeat were Ding Yaolong, Ding Shan, and Ding Song. But which other members of the Ding clan could match him? Though Zhang Chong had advanced into the severing mundane tier, he did not receive the favor of the Fu clan. Thus, he wanted to return to Dark Moon City with the father and daughter of the Mao clan. Ling Han simply traveled with them, and after a few months, they returned to Dark Moon City. In these few months, Ling Han comprehended under the reincarnation tree every day. Not only had he completely stabilized his cultivation level, he had even advanced to the middle stage of the first severance. Celestials cultivated regulations and power was secondary. Of course, if the regulations were too high and the power was too weak, then there would also be an imbalance, But the standard of measuring cultivation level was no longer power, but only regulations. The Empress had also refined a considerable amount of heavenly tribulation fluid and grasped two kinds of secret techniques of lightning. Now, she was going to raise these secret techniques to celestial level and further increase her battle prowess. Ling Han jumped down from the ship. This time, he was filled with confidence when he returned to Dark Moon City, because he was already a severing mundane ancestor. Ding Clan, pay some interest first. Chapter 1757. This was already not the first time that Ling Han had come to Dark Moon City, but he had never been as confident as he was today. In the past, the source of his confidence that he dared to oppose the Ding clan was the Black Tower. If I can't defeat you, I can hide. But this was actually very much not in line with Ling Han's personality. What he wanted was a quick revenge. This time he truly possessed this kind of strength. Come Ding clan, it's time to give you a surprise. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden temporarily entered into the Black Tower, and Ling Han and the Empress joined hands. In fact, the Empress had even revealed her true appearance this time. In this one-star city, they already had nothing to fear. When they arrived at the city gates, they did not even need to release the aura of a severing mundane ancestor. The Empress's exquisite appearance and noble bearing immediately stunned those guards. They involuntarily prostrated themselves, offering their humble respect to the Empress. At first, Mao Dai wanted to protect Ling Han and the Empress in secret, but was tactfully rejected by Ling Han, so he did not say anything more. Previously, Ling Han had successfully escaped from the Ding clan, and this time, his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, advancing into the severing mundane tier. Thus, there was even less of a need to worry. Ling Han and the Empress walked towards the Ding clan. However, though Dark Moon City was only a one-star city, its territory was really too large, and added with the restrictions of the regulations of the celestial realm, the two of them walked for a whole 3 days before finally arriving at the Ding clan residence. Ling Han walked straight to the main doors, one arm wrapped around the Empress's waist, appearing to be extremely calm. Stop right there. The guards at the door had originally wanted to stop Ling Han and the Empress, but when they suddenly saw the peerlessly beautiful face of the Empress, the 6 of them all gaped at the same time, their eyes staring blankly, unable to say another word. Wife, you alone can rival hundreds of millions of elites, Ling Han praised. The Empress's appearance and bearing were both top-notch, and that kind of innate nobility was enough to make countless people bow to her. It was no wonder that the Empress would be so proud. The Empress smiled. Her arrogant expression turned into a gentle one in front of Ling Han. Pung 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 pung. Ling Han attacked, sending the 6 people at the door flying. Their figures danced in the air like straw. Some crashed into the door, creating a hole in it. Some crashed into the wall. The wall didn't break, but their bones were broken. Ling Han did not show any mercy. He really did not have the slightest favorable impression of the Ding clan. This was a clan that emanated a rotten and malicious aura from the inside out. Perhaps even the mountain bandits' lair was cleaner than this place. If he could slaughter the bandits, why couldn't he do it here? Of the 6 people, 4 died on the spot, and the other 2 were not far from death. They were moaning and groaning, breathing less and exhaling more. Ling Han pulled out 2 of their divine souls to check, and his expression became even more sinister. True enough, there was not a single good person in the Ding clan. Even these guards had committed many evil deeds, relying on the power of the Ding clan to bully others and tyrannize women. Who knew how many people they had harmed? The great evils have to be eliminated, and the minor evils have to be executed as well. Ling Han stretched out a finger. Lightning shot out, turning into a spear that blasted the 2 guards that had not yet died to death. The heavens were heartless, so he would mete out punishment on behalf of the heavens. Who dares come to our Ding clan to make trouble? A few fierce shouts rang out, and 7 people flew out from the interior of the Ding clan, all of them showing expressions of anger. The Ding clan was one of the 3 great overlords of Dark Moon City, who dared to destroy their reputation. Not good, it's that evil brat. Ling Han has come to kill us. Quick, go and invite the ancestor. When these 7 people saw Ling Han's appearance, they couldn't help but turn green in fear. In the Ding clan, Ling Han was definitely the person that was hated the most, but he was also labeled as an incredibly dangerous person. Ancestor Ding, who had been killed by this evil brat. The 7 people hurriedly braked, and then turned to flee. The one with the highest cultivation level among them was only at the Genesis tier. So how could they possibly be a match for an invincible Genesis tier monster like Ling Han? They still did not know that Ling Han had already severed mundane tier and become a celestial. The Empress moved. Shwa. 7 flashes of sword chi condensed from lightning shot out. Pa 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 pa. Those 7 people were all blown into nothingness when they were struck. The destructive power of lightning was really too frightening. Ling Han smiled faintly. After the Empress drank the heavenly tribulation fluid, she had grasped 2 secret techniques of lightning. One was this thunderbolt, and the other was also lightning flash. Both secret techniques were very practical. Both of them wore calm expressions, exchanged a smile, and walked into the Ding clan. It's best to destroy this filthy land. Ling Han threw out a flurry of punches. Pung pung pung. Violent power swept out in a frenzy, and the houses in the surroundings suddenly collapsed in large swaths. And the whole Ding clan was shaking violently. What kind of power did he have now? When a severing mundane ancestor showed his might, that would be unstoppable. Impudence. A mighty figure appeared, and more members of the Ding clan surged out in the vicinity. All of them were glaring angrily at Ling Han, but when it came to the Empress, this kind of anger disappeared like smoke. Ling Han? That mighty figure was a first Severance Grand Elder, and his name was Ding Jun. His expression was a little strange, because Ding who had died at the hands of the Empress. But theoretically speaking, a severing mundane tier was definitely able to crush a Genesis tier. So he didn't know how to react at this moment. Should he attack directly, or ask for help from a stronger elite? However, most of the severing mundane tiers in the clan had been sent out to search for Ling Han. So aside from him, there was only one other first severance left, and that was Ding Yaolong. Despicable brat, you've come to die. An old man with a white beard called out. That was an eternal river tier of the Ding clan. Even in the celestial realm, not everyone could easily cultivate to the Genesis tier. Ling Han glanced at that old man. Pa! Under the terrifying pressure, the old man instantly exploded, turning into a cloud of blood rain. How dare you? Ding Jun roared in fury. He actually dared to kill someone in front of him. Despicable brat, you are too inhumane. Is that so? Ling Han stretched out a hand and grabbed that old man's divine sense that hadn't dissipated yet. He quickly recalled it through the method of memory, and said, he raped a female attendant at 15 years old, killed her husband in order to forcibly possess a woman at 21 years old, and tortured 2 little girls who weren't even 12 years old to death at 32 years old. What use is there for an old beast like him? Ling Han's eyes were cold, and he swept his gaze over the members of the Ding clan in the surroundings. Your Ding clan, can you find a good person? The members of the Ding clan were all furious. What was this kind of matter? There were so many people in the celestial realm, and just the population of Dark Moon City was in the tens of billions. Even if they killed people for fun every day, the number of people they killed was still less than the number of people who were born. What was so good about that? Just look at your expressions. Ling Han clenched his fists and cracking sounds could be heard. Since the heavens have not opened their eyes to punish you, then let me do it. His killing intent was completely revealed, and there was only endless killing intent left towards this group of human-faced beasts. They were only beasts, so what if he killed them? He walked out and shot out a punch. Pung 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 pung. Instantly, a dozen or so people exploded, turning into a cloud of blood rain. Today, the Ding clan is destined to flow with rivers of blood, Ling Han said, his voice as cold as the god of death from hell. Chapter 1758. Despicable brat, stop. Ding Jun roared in fury. With each punch from Ling Han, a dozen or so clansmen would die, and some of them were even his direct descendants. How could he not go mad at this? He leaped out, and launched an attack at Ling Han. Grand Elder is mighty. Grand Elder is domineering. Kill this thief. The surviving members of the Ding clan all roared loudly. No one had ever dared to enter the Ding clan alone and start a massacre. Ding Jun charged over, using a secret technique of time that could age all attacks, and then taking advantage of the opportunity to strike and kill. Ling Han's gaze became even colder, and he said, "Today, I will return justice to the Hu clan." This was like a bolt of lightning on a sunny day, causing Ding Jun's scalp to go numb. He roared loudly, "So you are a surviving member of the Hu clan?" No wonder Ling Han always opposed the Ding clan, and even attracted the Han clan that had no relation to him at all, causing the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan to be destroyed. So Ling Han was actually a descendant of the Hu clan. There was finally a logical explanation for all this. Yet Ling Han had no intention of explaining. If Ding Jun wanted to misunderstand, then so be it. In any case, he was here to kill. His attack seemed to be neither hurried nor slow. Yet he forcefully grabbed Ding Jun's attack and grabbed him by the neck. A great first severance Grand Elder was like a duck, his neck being grabbed, his limbs powerless as he struggled. This gap in strength was as wide as the gap between heaven and earth. Ling Han used his other hand to grab Ding Jun's neck, and with a twist, there was a crack, and Ding Jun's neck was forcibly broken. Pooh! A spray of blood sprayed out, and the old guy's limbs instantly drooped like a dead dog. He was indeed dead. His physical body had been destroyed, and even his spirit had been destroyed by Ling Han's power of regulation. There was no chance for him to escape at all. Ling Han casually tossed Ding Jun's corpse to the side. Of course, he did not forget to search out all the spatial god tools and the like. There was dead silence in the surroundings. Grand Elder Ding Jun was dead, not even able to withstand a single blow from Ling Han. He was easily killed like a dog or a chicken. That was a first severance Grand Elder. Everyone's legs were trembling. They wanted to run, but they felt as if their legs were filled with lead. They couldn't move at all. Ling Han showed no mercy. With a punch, more than 10 people exploded, their bodies and souls destroyed. "Spare me." Some people had weak wills, and immediately knelt down to beg Ling Han for mercy. "You disdainful juniors, don't beg for mercy from this executioner. Don't tell me he'll let us off like this." Some of the more stubborn ones raised their heads and glared at Ling Han, as if they wanted to memorize his face so that after they died, they could turn into ghosts to exact revenge. How could Ling Han care? He would only bring one thing to the Ding clan today, and that was death. Wherever he passed, the entire Ding clan was annihilated. Ling Han and the Empress continued to advance. He wasn't familiar with the Ding clan, so he naturally went to the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan. He was familiar with that place. Despicable son. Quickly go inform the family head. Wherever Ling Han passed, he didn't leave a single survivor. He had killed too many. There wasn't a single good person in the Ding clan at all. Something like mercy was really too extravagant for the Ding clan. More than 2 hours later, Ling Han and the Empress arrived at the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan. These 2 years had passed, and the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan had naturally been rebuilt. The golden walls were glorious, and it was still as solemn and dignified as before. A bunch of villains. When they were alive, they committed evil, and when they were dead, they still had to be enshrined and worshipped. Ling Han smirked coldly and shot out a punch, beginning to wreak havoc. There was a legend in the celestial realm, and that was that after someone died, if their memorial tablet was set up and worshipped, then after enough time, that person's soul would reunite, and then be reborn in the bloodline of their descendants. If they succeeded, this bloodline's descendant could easily reach the height of that person when he was alive. To a clan, this had extraordinary significance. Moreover, this also fulfilled the wish of eternal life. After all, there was still the immortal's tribulation. In the celestial realm, there were actually not many elites that could really live forever. It was just that a great many old monsters had lived for so long that it was hair-raising. The Ding clan had set up this ancestral shrine in hopes that those ancestors could still reunite their souls and come back to life in the bodies of their descendants, adding more elites to the Ding clan. Villains that had been dead for many years still wanted to come back to life and commit evil again? Of course not. Ling Han attacked with his full strength. Hong long long. The entire ancestral shrine shook violently, but it didn't collapse immediately. That was because there were formations protecting this place, and Ling Han wasn't a fourth Severance elite like Han Lu, so his destructive power couldn't compare. But he immediately activated the Nine Heavens Flame, Xianing Source Water, and the power of lightning, and this destructive power was terrifying. Especially the Nine Heavens Flame and Xianing Source Water. Their might couldn't be measured by cultivation level. As long as one came into contact with them, that great Tao would unleash its might, and everything would be destroyed. Actually, the power of lightning was also very frightening. This was the strongest power of the immortal realm, but it was limited by the level of the ancient realm. But after entering into the celestial realm, this limit was unlocked, and its might was really super strong. From a certain perspective, this power of lightning was also nurtured by heaven and earth, and could actually also be considered a source power. The ancestral memorial tablets. What sin has our Ding clan committed? A great many elders that were paying their respects in the ancestral shrine were all crying and snot. They all ran out and glared angrily at Ling Han. If looks could kill, then Ling Han would definitely have been torn into pieces. Brat! An angry roar rang out. Finally, another elite had arrived. Ding Shuang, a first Severance Grand Elder. This was a very outstanding clansman of the Ding clan, and he had attained Dao very early on. Thus, he only looked to be in his 40s, and his vigor was as vast as the sea. He gave an angry shout, and the vigor around him boiled. He was like a demon king that had come out of the mountains, his aura arrogant. Ding Xiaochen also appeared. He looked dumbfounded at this enemy of his, Ling Han. He already didn't know how to express his feelings. The strength of this enemy had already reached a level that he could only look up to. He only dared to harbor hatred in his heart, but didn't even dare to express it. After a few times, he had already been taught a lesson by Ling Han, until he had no temper left. A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind, and he softly shouted, "Battle beasts appear!" Suddenly, 3 flashes of light surged out from his body. The white light condensed into a tiger, the red light condensed into a sparrow, and the blue light was a thunder beast. 10 Beasts Technique, the core celestial technique of the Myriad Beast Celestial King. After so many days, he had slightly grasped some of the profound mysteries of the 10 Beasts Technique, and could condense 3 battle beasts, respectively using the 9 Heavens Flame, the Xianing Source Water, and the Heavenly Tribulation Lightning as their cores. He wanted to test out the might of these 3 battle beasts. Once the 3 battle beasts appeared, a murderous aura immediately soared into the skies. Those that were more timid coughed so much that they even spat out bile. Ding Shuang also paled in shock. He had a feeling that he would only be killed if any of the battle beasts made a move. How was this possible? He stared at Ling Han a few more times, and couldn't help but show intense shock on his face. Jean Mundane Tier, you. You've actually advanced into the Severing Mundane Tier. The heavens were blind. This kind of bastard that deserved to be killed 1,000 times actually advanced into the Severing Mundane Tier. Chapter 1760. It's not bullshit. Ling Han just stared at the bell. If he could defeat Ding Yaolong, why would he say that he would do it again in the future? He was only a first Severance, and no matter how freakish he was still only a first Severance. A second Severance that could sweep away all opponents, and could barely match a third Severance in the early stage was already a monster among monsters. The gap between fourth Severance and fourth Severance was really too great. Ding Yaolong shook the bell, and released boundless black qi as he said, "This is called the Black Mist Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. Countless years ago, the ancestors of my Ding clan began to refine it. However, countless souls were needed as sacrifices in order to refine this item. In order not to be obliterated by the heavenly punishment, every generation of ancestors would only refine a portion of it. Countless years passed before they finally succeeded. If it weren't for the fact that your potential is too terrifying, I really wouldn't want to expose the secret of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts." The black fog surged, transforming into a sea. Multiple skulls appeared in the sea fog, releasing shrill howls that could easily cause a severing mundane tear to bleed from all orifices. If an ordinary slash were to enter, it would probably be separated from its body by such a shrill howl in just 2 or 3 strikes. The situation is tense, let's go. The large black dog immediately broke into a run. I'll retreat first. I'll leave the mission of being the envoy of justice to you, brat. At this moment, it didn't have the slightest bit of solemnity left. If he believed this large black dog, he would definitely be too naive and kind. Ling Han also leaped over to the Empress's side. If anything went wrong, the two of them would enter into the Black Tower together. You still want to escape from the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts? Ding Yaolong said coldly. He had even brought out such a secret weapon. Naturally, he was determined to kill Ling Han. Amidst the shrill cries of ghosts, countless skulls pounced towards Ling Han and the Empress, each of them possessing battle prowess in the third severance. Don't say that they were only at the third severance, but just how many were there? 10,000 thus. Putting aside the fact that Ling Han and the Empress were only at the first severance, even a fourth severance Grand Elder would probably only be able to flee in disarray when faced with this treasure. That made sense. If it wasn't for the fact that the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts was so powerful, why would the ancestors of the Ding family have risked heavenly punishment generation after generation to forge it? You're just a ghost. Hurry up and scram. Ling Han roared and unleashed his 9 heavens flame. Boom! Raging flames surged, forming a circle that protected him and the Empress within. This was effective. The skeletons were bound outside the circle, but the skeletons continued to charge forward. Every time a skeleton charged over, it would consume a portion of the flame shield. Like this, it wouldn't take long for the skeletons to break through. Even so, Ding Yaolong was still extremely shocked. If he had been trapped by the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, his situation would not have been much better than Ling Han's. But who is he? This was naturally the work of the 9 heavens flame. The heaven and earth ancestor flame was extremely domineering. It was a pity that Ling Han's cultivation level was too low, which limited the might of the 9 heavens flame. Otherwise, even an immortal king would tremble at the sight of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. No matter how monstrous this evil child was, he would not be able to escape death. Ding Yaolong revealed a ferocious expression and said, "Bastard, I'll seize all your fortune once you're dead. As for the woman beside you, I'll refine her into a beautiful corpse." I'm sure that many people would be willing to play with her. With his status, he should not have uttered such threats. But who asked Ling Han to destroy the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan twice? Ding Yaolong's heart was really filled with hatred. If he did not say a few words at this time, he would not be able to vent his anger, even if he cut Ling Han into 1,000 pieces. Ding Yaolong, I didn't think that you would be like this. The large black dog circled back, appearing behind Ding Yaolong, and bit down. Ah! Ding Yaolong screamed in pain. He had never thought that the large black dog would actually appear and disappear so mysteriously, being able to silently appear behind him. He had been bitten solidly by the large black dog this time. In the past, the large black dog had not yet become a celestial, and Han Lu, who was also a fourth severance, had been viciously bitten by the large black dog. Now that the large black dog had advanced into the severing mundane tier, even if Ding Yaolong was slightly stronger than Han Lu, the gap between him and the large black dog had actually shrunk innumerable times. This bite caused Ding Yaolong's back to straighten, and his buttocks suddenly jerked forward. Grandpa Dog's monkey steals peaches. The large black dog had long since anticipated this, and he released his bite and turned around. He had already arrived in front of Ding Yaolong, and he viciously kicked out with his leg, which just happened to be aimed at Ding Yaolong's raised buttocks. Pa! The sound of balls shattering rang out. Even if Ding Yaolong was a fourth severance Grand Elder, so what? This was not just a pain in the balls, but rather his balls had been shattered. Oh! He screamed, his legs suddenly clamped tightly together, and his face had even paled. Grandpa Dog's 3 consecutive moves, the final strike, chrysanthemum destruction. The large black dog circled behind Ding Yaolong again, and his paw directly stabbed into his buttocks. Ah! Ding Yaolong was really overwhelmed with joy this time. His chrysanthemum had been severely injured, and he screamed in pain again. His pain was indescribable. Success, retreat! The large black dog immediately broke into a run. He had always played dirty. What was a head-on battle? Grandpa Dog did not know how to do that. Ding Yaolong's legs were clamped tightly together, one hand covering his buttocks, and the other hand was still holding the bell. This scene was very strange, no matter how one looked at it. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. The large black dog's dirty tricks came one after another, so he definitely couldn't be careless in the future. This despicable dog did not differentiate between friend and foe at all. Otherwise, if he was tricked by it one day, he wouldn't even have anyone to cry to. In this way, Ding Yaolong could no longer activate the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, and his attacks naturally dissipated. Ding Yaolong. The Grand Elder of the Long clan appeared, his expression cold. I never thought that your Ding clan would actually secretly refine such a vicious evil tool. No wonder there are clansmen of my Long clan disappearing from time to time. So it turns out that they have all fallen to your evil schemes. Xiao, another figure, appeared. The Grand Elder of the Duan clan had also arrived, and he was similarly staring at the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, his eyes sinister. Ding Yaolong, I need an explanation, he said calmly, but his tone was incredibly insistent. All of a sudden, Ding Yaolong was actually being interrogated by two great Fourth Severance Grand Elders. These two weren't Han Lu, but were true prodigies. If it was a one-on-one battle, it would be difficult to say who would emerge victorious. If it was 2 against 1, he would definitely be in trouble. Of course, if a fierce battle really erupted, he would definitely be able to severely wound, or even kill one of them, even if he had to risk his life. Ding Yaolong humphed and said, What do I want to explain? Both of you better get out of my way. Otherwise, I will also slaughter both of you. No matter what, he was definitely going to kill Ling Han today. Drip, drip, drip. His crotch and buttocks were both bleeding, and paired with his cold and arrogant expression, the impact was a little too great. Though the Grand Elders of the Duan clan and the Long clan were both furious and hateful when they saw Ding Yaolong's miserable appearance, especially when his legs were tightly clamped together, as if someone had raped his ass, their aged faces couldn't help but twitch. They really wanted to fucking laugh. This was seen by Ding Yaolong, and he couldn't help but tremble in anger. Two elites of the same cultivation level were actually laughing at him. It wasn't because they were friendly, but rather because they were mocking him. He was very angry. No, he was exploding with anger. All of you die, he roared loudly, and activated the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts again. More refreshing. Chapter 1761. The Bell of 10,000 Ghosts was really too frightening. If treasures could be divided into flawless severances and ordinary severances, then the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts would be a flawless severance, and one that could sever heaven and earth. It could definitely sweep aside all elites of the same cultivation level. Otherwise, the Ding clan would be too foolish to pay such a huge price to refine it. Thus, the moment the ghost fog appeared, the two great grand ancestors could only retreat, and Ling Han and the Empress also used lightning flash, and similarly left the range of the ghost fog. Malicious spirits howled, rolling about in the black fog. Those ghostly cries had a considerable effect on Ling Han and the others, causing them to bleed from their orifices like malicious spirits. What a frightening treasure! The only one that was not affected was Ding Yaolong. He was the controller of the treasure, so he was naturally immune. As for the large black dog, because he had really run too far away, he was not affected. Ling Han's physique was strong, and his spirit had also been tempered by the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Though he bled from his orifices, he could still hold on. The Empress had 9 doppelgangers, and in this half a year, she had already refined the few doppelgangers that had been destroyed. The attack that she suffered was shared by 10 doppelgangers, so she could still hold on. After all, this was only a portion of the might of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. The two great grand ancestors Duan and Long could still hold on. Their cultivation level was obvious, and it was too difficult to wound them with just a sound wave attack. Thus, Though the four of them were in a very sorry state, they could completely hold on. To capture the bandits, first capture the ringleader. The two great-grand ancestors Duan and Long exclaimed softly, and charged towards Ding Yaolong. They could not continue to passively take a beating like this. But Ding Yaolong did not make a move at all, and merely summoned the black fog over, entangling it around his body. In this way, if the two great-grand ancestors Duan Long and Long forcefully attacked, they would be trapped by the black fog, and that would definitely be a heavy loss. Two old geezers, I had originally planned to kill you two after a few 100 million years, but since the secret of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts has been exposed today, I might as well take this chance to kill you all, Ding Yaolong said coldly. The Duan clan and the Long clan's grand ancestors both secretly exclaimed in their hearts that they were lucky. They had never thought that the Ding clan would actually refine such a malicious precious tool. And the key point was that they had actually managed to refine it. It had to be known that if one tried to forge such an evil weapon, the heavens and earth would punish them by force. However, it seemed like there was a mysterious power suppressing the evil of the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. It was just a tiny bit away from meeting the requirements to form a heavenly punishment. As a result, although the thunderclouds had formed, no heavenly punishment had descended. If he was caught off guard by Ding Yaolong's Bell of 10,000 Ghosts, he would definitely be finished. Thankfully they knew now. Now that they knew, things would be easier. After all, this was only a pseudo-celestial tool equivalent to a fourth severance. Ding Yaolong was battling two great fourth severance grand elders by himself. Yet not only was he suppressing them to the point where they could only flee in panic, but he was also free to attack Ling Han and the Empress. The person he wanted to kill the most was still Ling Han. If they allowed Ling Han to escape this time, then the Ding clan would definitely be finished. This brat had to die. Ling Han and the Empress continued to channel lightning flash. After advancing into the severing mundane tier, both their power and regulations had increased innumerable times. Thus, they would not be exhausted after using lightning flash a few times. He did not retreat because Ling Han wanted to know exactly how powerful this evil weapon was, which would decide when he would charge back. When he came to the Ding clan again, he definitely would not flee again. Instead, he would completely destroy the Ding clan. Grand Ancestor. Right at this moment, they heard a roar that was filled with fury. Ding Song. He had previously gone to the Han clan and had just run back. The first thing he saw was that the ancestral shrine had been destroyed again, so he was naturally furious to the extreme. He immediately went to Ling Han, his eyes narrowing. His instincts told him that all of this was caused by Ling Han. He had really not guessed wrong. This person is Ling Han. There was another person by Ding Song's side. He was dressed in black, and there were patterns on his clothes that looked like spiders, causing one to unconsciously feel disgusted. This was a man, and he looked to be about 40 years old. There was actually a pattern on his face that extended all the way to his neck, and there was probably one on his chest as well, though it was not there yet. He took a second look at the Empress's face, and couldn't help but reveal an incredibly stunned expression. Even his gaze changed intensely. In reply to "Milord, that despicable brat is Ling Han," Ding Song hurriedly answered respectfully. This man in black was called Han Hongfei, and he was a Yang Soul ancestor of the Han clan. Dividing Soul tier was divided into 4 levels: Heaven, Earth, Yin, and Yang. Though Yang Soul was the first level, from the Severing Mundane tier to the Dividing Soul tier, this step was as great as from the Genesis tier to the Severing Mundane tier. No matter how prodigious one was, it was impossible to make up for this gap. Han Hongfei reluctantly withdrew his gaze from the Empress's face, then turned to Ling Han, and calmly said, "You can kill yourself. And this little girl come here." He was completely issuing an order. This was natural. He was a Yang Soul elite, and who here could be a match for him? "Milord, this is Dark Moon City," the Grand Elder of the Duan clan couldn't help but say. Above Dark Moon City was the Black Moon sect, and above the Black Moon sect was the Fu clan. No matter what, it was not the Han clan's turn to strut around here. "Are you threatening me?" Han Hongfei swept a cold glance over the Grand Elder of the Duan clan, his Yang Soul level aura rippling out, as if the heavens were collapsing. The Grand Elder of the Duan clan immediately spat out blood. The gap in cultivation level was too great. He could not even withstand a single look or aura from the other party. The Grand Elder of the Long clan clenched his fists, but dared not speak out in anger. Facing the bell of 10,000 ghosts, he could still parry and dodge, but against a Yang Soul elite, he would die with a wave of his hand. "My lord, this junior cannot take down this brat. Please, my lord, make a move." Ding Yaolong put away the bell of 10,000 ghosts. Since someone from the Han clan had come, and it was a Yang Soul elite at that, then Ling Han was definitely dead. There was no need for him to make a move. Han Hongfei acted as if he had not heard him. What need was there for him to pay attention to a mere fourth severance? Without entering the dividing soul tier, fourth severance was trash. He then glanced at Ling Han and the Empress, and showed an expression of impatience. "What are you still standing around for? Old ignorant man, has your head been kicked by a donkey?" Ling Han couldn't help but curse. "If you want to die, then go die by yourself. Fuck off. Fuck off." Han Hongfei couldn't help but be startled, and then was enraged. A first severance junior actually dared point at his nose and curse him. He humphed, and immediately stretched out a hand to grab at Ling Han. Boom, his origin power was vast. This was an attack from a dividing soul tier. So how could it be something that a severing mundane tier could compare to? Even a fourth severance would only be left in the dust. "Old ignorant man, you are causing trouble for the Han clan. I will come to the Han clan to settle the score with you sooner or later." Ling Han tossed out these words, grabbed the Empress, and entered into the Black Tower. Super invincible escape. Xiao, the two of them immediately disappeared. Hung Long Long. Han Hongfei's palm strike landed, but completely missed, and the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan, that had originally only been half destroyed, completely crumbled with this strike. This was a dividing soul tier elite. A muscle twitched in Ding Yaolong's cheek. He felt as if his ancestors were going to crawl out of their graves to find him again. Chapter 1762. The search for traces of Ling Han and the Empress naturally ended in failure. This allowed Ling Han to understand that at least dividing soul tier elites were still unable to discover the Black Tower. Thinking further, the Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire hadn't reacted to the Black Tower either, so this safety line could probably be expanded to Immortal Palace tier elites. If he encountered an ascending origin tier elite, he would have to be cautious. In any case, Celestial Kings would definitely be able to discover the existence of the Black Tower. This was something that Small Tower had repeatedly warned him about. Han Hongfei was extremely angry. The Grand Yang Soul ancestor was actually going to return empty-handed. Not only did he want to capture Ling Han to restore the Han clan's prestige, but he also wanted to seize the great fortune that Ling Han possessed. It was extremely likely that he possessed a Celestial King tier cultivation technique. If it weren't for the fact that the Han clan didn't want to draw attention to themselves, they would have sent an Immortal Palace tier elite over. In the end, when Han Hongfei saw the Empress, he also had some improper thoughts. Such an exquisite beauty could indeed make one's heart beat faster, and he couldn't control himself at all. Unfortunately, all of his wishes were for naught. He couldn't find the person he was looking for, and no matter how powerful he was, it was useless. Unwilling to give up, he dug deep into the ground and searched for Ling Han. He definitely did not believe that Ling Han had the ability to unleash the space movement secret technique in front of him. In this way, the ancestral shrine of the Ding clan would be completely destroyed. Originally, the ancestral temple could still be rebuilt, and the memorial tablets could be put back. Then, after 18 years, he would still be a good man. However, the current situation was that Han Hongfei had refined every single brick and tile into nothingness. He was worried that Ling Han's spatial god artifact was extremely small, and that it would run away. Ding Yaolong's face paled. His heart was bleeding as he watched his test for the position of Ding first be forcefully refined. All the ancestors, he didn't dare to stop him, and could only hate Ling Han to the bone. He swore that if he had the chance, he would tear Ling Han into pieces. Not only did Han Hongfei refine everything on the ground, He even scraped off layer after layer of the ground. Only when spring water gushed out from underground and turned the area around the ancestral temple of the Ding clan into a lake did he helplessly give up. He really couldn't find that kid. Did he really use some kind of spatial technique? Immortal King's secret technique. His expression immediately changed, and then his eyes turned red. The gap between him and Ling Han was an entire realm and 4 minor realms. This gap in strength was truly boundless, but Ling Han had still managed to fool him. This kind of secret technique was too awesome. If he obtained it, wouldn't that mean that he wouldn't need to fear Immortal Palace tier elites? Han Hongfei did not give up, and he stayed in the Ding clan. In any case, the lifespan of a celestial was unlimited, and he could completely afford to be exhausted. He was betting that maybe Ling Han was still nearby, because he really didn't sense any spatial fluctuations. Maybe Ling Han had just temporarily entered an alternate dimension, and he couldn't find him. With Han Hongfei overseeing things, the Duan clan and Long clan naturally did not dare to raise their troops against the Ding clan and cause trouble for the Bell of 10,000 Ghosts. However, they immediately sent someone to report this to the Black Moon sect. In fact, if the Black Moon sect could not deal with it, they would have to continue reporting to their superiors. This kind of evil tool definitely could not be allowed to appear. After staying in the Black Tower for a few days, Ling Han quietly left. He deliberately suppressed his aura, and even a young soul elite would find it extremely difficult to discover him, unless they just happened to see him with their naked eyes, or if the distance was ridiculously close. Little Han, come with Grandpa Dog. However, Ling Han hadn't walked for long when the large black dog appeared out of nowhere. He stood on his hind legs and put his arm around Ling Han's shoulder, looking like a good brother. The nose of a dog was indeed sensitive, yet Ling Han was on guard. This large black dog tricked everyone, so he definitely couldn't trust his enthusiasm. Otherwise, even if he was tricked, he would still have to count the money for him. Well, he said casually, Grandpa Dog discovered an ancient site, and there are a few celestial medicines inside. How about it? Are you interested in making a trip with Grandpa Dog? The large black dog asked. Ling Han was filled with suspicion. There's such a good thing, and you actually don't want to take it for yourself? What kind of person do you think Grandpa Dog is? The large black dog's expression was filled with indignation, as if he had been wronged. Grandpa Dog thought of you at the first moment, yet you suspect Grandpa Dog like this. Grandpa Dog was blind, and mistakenly believed a heartless dog like you. Pay. There was a disdainful expression on Ling Han's face, and he said, your expression is so exaggerated, which makes me feel even more suspicious. The large black dog instantly stopped, and reached his paw into his iron underwear. He grinned and said, I didn't think that you would discover Grandpa Dog's true colors so quickly. In the future, if I want to deceive you, it will be much more difficult. He supported his mouth with a hand. This wouldn't do. Ling Han instantly kicked him. This despicable dog was really detestable. Alright brat, that ancient site is slightly dangerous, so Grandpa Dog wants you to stand guard and be my fighter. The large black dog leaped away, and told the truth. Ling Han's expression was filled with suspicion. The large black dog definitely wouldn't tell the truth just like that. However, though the large black dog was despicable, it indeed seemed that he hadn't harmed him before. Alright then, let's go. Ling Han nodded. With the help of celestial medicines, his cultivation level would advance even faster. If he could advance into the second severance, then apart from Ding Yaolong, he would be able to kill any member of the Ding clan. Even if he faced Ding Yaolong, he wouldn't be like before, only able to dodge. No matter what, he would be able to fight back with 1 or 2 moves. I just knew that brat with that sneaky face of yours would definitely nod, the large black dog said with a smile. The man and dog arrived in a dense forest. The large black dog took out pieces of godly metal and began to fiddle with them on the ground, piling them up to form what looked like an altar. These weren't godly metal, but pseudo-divine metal. Ling Han couldn't help but feel envious, and he really wanted to steal a few pieces. He didn't care how many stars of pseudo-divine metal they were, as long as they could be swallowed by the divine demon sword. However, he immediately asked in confusion, "Little Black, aren't we going to some ancient site? Hey, how long are you going to run with your 2 legs? Even if I'm skilled in spatial teleportation, don't even think about it without 10 days to half a month." The large black dog said disdainfully, "Brat, you don't understand. Grandpa Dog is currently constructing a teleportation formation." Ling Han was puzzled, and he asked, "You actually know how to construct formations?" "That's only natural. In the past The large black dog paused and scratched his behind. "What happened to me in the past? It's so strange. I seem to have lost a large amount of my memories." Ling Han felt the same way. The large black dog definitely had an extraordinary background. In the past, when he was still at the Genesis tier, he could already bite the behind of a 4th Severance Grand Elder. Though he couldn't injure him, being able to bite him was already an incredibly rare thing. Ling Han was freakish, right? But if he wanted him to silently approach a 4th Severance Grand Elder and make a move, putting aside the fact that he couldn't do it when he was at the Genesis tier, he still couldn't do it now either. Grandpa Dog can't remember. The large black dog was driven mad for a while, and suddenly showed a despicable smile. "Come, let's go and empty that ancient site." This sudden change in attitude caught Ling Han completely off guard. What kind of brain circuit was this? The large black dog prepared for a very long time, and a small altar had already been constructed. He and Ling Han climbed onto it, and began to mutter something. This was an incredibly dry and obscure text, and the syllables were very strange. Ling Han tried to repeat it, yet shockingly discovered that he actually couldn't remember a single word. Wang. Right at this moment the altar shone, and enveloped the human and dog. Then, it trembled lightly, and when the light dissipated, Ling Han and the large black dog had already disappeared. Chapter 1764. Ling Han reacted quickly. "Pa!" He knocked that person unconscious with a slap. He turned to the large black dog and said, "Damn dog, I fell for your trick again. How is this some ancient site? It's clearly the medicinal garden of some great sect." The person that was knocked unconscious was naturally the herb farmer. Just then, Ling Han clearly sensed that he was casting some kind of technique, drawing out the regulations of heaven and earth, and injecting them into the medicinal ingredients. The large black dog's eyes swiveled rapidly. Soon he looked like he had given up, and admitted, "You're smart, brat. You discovered it so quickly. Grandpa Dog admires you." Ling Han was speechless. This damn dog was completely avoiding the main point. "We're already here, and there's already a lot of dirt in your pocket. It's too late to stop now." The large black dog said in a tone that said, "Since you've already been dragged into the water, don't pretend to be pure. Come, let's go find celestial medicine." Ling Han sighed. He felt that his willpower was really weak, actually becoming restless because of this suggestion. "Let's go," he said. Just as the large black dog said, he had already boarded a pirate ship, so he'd be a thief for once. The Empress, however, did not care. In her mind, everything in the world was hers, and Ling Han was her man, so what couldn't he take? They continued to advance, and also continued to harvest medicinal ingredients. They encountered a few more herb farmers on the way, and Ling Han knocked them unconscious and put them into the Black Tower. They would be released when they left later. 2 days later, they were just walking when a white shadow streaked past at an incredibly fast speed. Ling Han followed that trail and saw that it was a small deer. It was no more than 3 inches tall, really pitifully small. And this deer was actually the color of flesh, almost transparent. One could clearly see that its body did not have any internal organs, but rather a seed. 7 lives divine clouds. Ling Han instantly called out. This small deer was not a real deer, but a godly medicine, and was called 7 lives divine clouds. It would go through 7 metamorphoses in its life, and each time, it would change into a different form. For example, it was now in the form of a deer. In different forms, it contained completely different laws. It could be said to be an extremely mystical immortal medicine. As long as the 7 lives divine clouds entered the first form, it would signify that they had ripened, and they could be harvested and consumed. However, depending on the form, the regulations that they would receive would also be different. As for the specifics, Ling Han didn't know. This was related to the environment in which the celestial medicine grew, because this kind of immortal medicine has legs and can run around. Xiaolu also turned back to look at Ling Han and suddenly said, "Brat, why are you looking at Lord Deer like that? Be careful that Lord Deer doesn't burst your chrysanthemum." Ling Han felt like crying. Why was it that all the things he encountered were out of the ordinary? Ancient ruins would change mysteriously. Now, when he encountered a stock of immortal medicine, he was actually talking like a hooligan. Celestial medicine, obediently come into Grandpa Dog's mouth. The large black dog's eyes instantly lit up, and he pounced toward the 7 lives divine clouds. "Damn dog, it's been millions of years since you've had a mouthful. Your Grandpa Deer is about to be choked to death by you." Xiaolu Deer's face was filled with disgust, and its 4 legs immediately shot off. Ling Han, the Empress, and the large black dog hurriedly chased after them. Xiao xiao xiao. They were all extremely fast. Ling Han and the Empress both cultivated lightning flash, so their speed was naturally top-notch, and there was no need to mention the large black dog. He was skilled in spatial movement, and when he had been in the Genesis tier, even a 4th Severance Grand Elder couldn't catch up to him. But even so, they still couldn't catch up to Xiaolu, because this celestial medicine was extremely mystical. After it ran past, a large number of vines would grow out from the ground and entangle towards Ling Han and the others, causing them a certain amount of trouble. As long as there was a moment of delay, with the speed of this celestial medicine, it would be enough to maintain a distance from Ling Han and the others. "A bunch of trash, and you still want to eat your Grandpa Deer? You'd better eat your Grandpa Deer's soil." Xiaolu Deer taunted as it ran, its expression incredibly arrogant. The Empress was furious and waved her slender hand, launching an attack. Suddenly, sword chi swept out, splitting the heavens and earth. That celestial medicine was so frightened that it spat out a few drops of medicinal liquid, its white deer face turning green. When others encountered a celestial medicine like it, they would all try their best to capture it, but did not dare to make any other moves. That was because it was a celestial medicine, and no matter what kind of injury it suffered, it would still be an incredibly huge loss. With such a mentality and all kinds of methods, although it had long matured, it was able to mingle very well in this place. Only when it encountered a few super powerhouses did it have to bleed a little, but it could not bear to eat all of them. But this woman was really too tender and protective, looking as if she was going to beat you to death, causing it to spit out a few drops of celestial liquid in fright. "Holy shit, that scared me to death." Ling Han reacted quickly, and with a grab, he stored those few drops of celestial liquid into a jade bottle. His expression was a little strange. This was indeed the precious liquid inside the body of a celestial medicine. But the problem was that it had just sprayed out from behind the small deer's buttocks. When he thought of this scene, he would definitely be traumatized when he consumed it. He was puzzled. Why did he always encounter these strange things? I surrender, the small deer wailed. "Don't chase after Grandpa Deer anymore. If you want celestial medicine, Grandpa Deer will give you some, all right? Please don't kill Grandpa Deer." It was very afraid of death. A thought flashed through Ling Han's mind, and he said, "We won't hurt you either. Why don't you come with me? I have a medicinal garden, and I'm sure you'll like it. You don't seem like a good person at all. You're still a few thousand years too early to lie to your Grandpa Deer." The small deer's expression was filled with disgust. The Empress's expression was cold, and she raised her slender hand. "I like it, of course I like it." The small deer's expression was instantly filled with determination, and it looked like it would get angry with anyone who did not let it like it. Ling Han couldn't help but ask the large black dog, "Is this your relative?" The large black dog scratched his buttocks. "Looks like it. Looks like your sister. Your Grandpa Deer doesn't have such an ugly relative like you. Look at you, both of your teeth are showing. How ugly are you?" The small deer's ability to attract hatred was also top-notch, and it began to provoke the large black dog. Waya, Grandpa Dog is going to eat this guy. The large black dog bared his teeth. Don't stop, Grandpa Dog. If it weren't for Ling Han pulling on his tail, he would definitely have already charged out. Stop fooling around. Ling Han drew the 7 lives divine clouds into the black tower. Ancestor. The small deer immediately arrived at the reincarnation tree and instantly paled in shock. It fluttered over to the foot of the tree and rubbed its head everywhere. After a while, it couldn't help but feel strange. Something's wrong. This mother tree has clearly already grown. But why hasn't it developed intelligence? It's as if it has only lived for a few hundred years. It really hadn't guessed wrong. The reincarnation tree had been accelerated by Small Tower, using a secret technique. From a seed to its current state, it was actually even younger than Ling Han. Yet Ling Han was shocked, and couldn't help but say to Small Tower, "The reincarnation tree is also a source power of heaven and earth." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.